the Hogwarts professor mixed into Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26, Lockhart's Educational Philosophy. Professor Lockhart, are you also taking the Hogwarts Express? Why not go in now? Can you give me an autograph? After reading your book, I have a lot of questions in my mind. Can I ask you something? About gals, Professor, can you tell me why? Lockhart, who was watching a large number of little wizards pouring into the Hogwarts Express, suddenly felt a chirping sound in his ears. It directly interrupted his memories of his previous life. Lockhart frowned slightly, lowered his head, and looked at the little witch with thick and messy brown hair who was pulling at his sleeves. Although he was unhappy in his heart, he still said calmly, "This little witch, be quiet. Take your time, don't rush." "Okay, Professor. I'm so lucky to meet you before class. By the way, I read your latest book and I want to ask you a question." Hearing Lockhart's calm tone, Hermione immediately slowed down her speech, but a lot of questions still popped out of her mouth. Lockhart had a headache after hearing it. He just wanted to be quiet for a while. This little witch was too active. Looking at the little witch who was begging for an answer, Lockhart sighed softly. Then silence. He waved his wand lightly, and under Hermione's surprised eyes, a silent spell instantly made Hermione unable to make any sound. Suddenly, Lockhart felt a sense of silence in his ears. This feeling was simply too good. "Don't worry, I will remove the spell for you later, and I can also answer your questions. But, take your time, don't rush, answer one question, and then ask the next one." Lockhart lowered his head, and looked at the little witch with an anxious face, and said slowly, looking at the little witch who nodded frantically. Lockhart nodded with satisfaction, took the wand, waved it lightly, and cast a rhythm. "Professor, before asking questions, should you tell me your name first?" Looking at the little witch who had just removed the spell, and was about to ask questions again, Lockhart said hurriedly. Hermione was stunned for a moment, then immediately replied, "Professor, my name is Hermione Granger. I'm a second-year student at Hogwarts, from Gryffindor College, and last year I was the president of our college." Listening to Hermione's endless introduction of herself, Lockhart felt a little desperate, so he raised his wand and pretended to cast another silent spell. Hermione stopped talking immediately. Then, as if she knew that her behavior was not pleasing to others, she asked Lockhart timidly, "Professor, did I do something wrong just now?" Lockhart smiled with a little relief. "And you still know that you did something wrong?" However, his previous life as a university teacher still made him say in a gentle tone, "Miss Granger, asking questions is a good behavior. But, don't rush. Take your time. I'm a professor. You are a student. If you have questions, as long as I understand, I will definitely answer them. So, think carefully first. What are your 3 biggest doubts?" Hearing Lockhart's gentle tone, Hermione nodded, and then a thoughtful light flashed in her eyes. Seeing this, Lockhart nodded slightly. Sure enough, educating children with many problems. The best way is not to tell him the answer to every question directly. Instead, let him guide himself, and let him choose valuable questions, and even think about the questions and the answers. Cultivating his ability to think deeply is the key. Of course, it can also make him feel at ease. Otherwise, there are too many questions, and he can't stand it. He is not a machine to answer questions. As for this little witch, it is Hermione, one of the 3 little ones in Gryffindor. Although Lockhart was a little surprised, he didn't care much. Harry Potter and Dumbledore have met, so what's wrong with Hermione? She is still his student. In his previous life, he also taught some celebrities who were still in school. They still asked him questions, and gave him homework, and he didn't think it was a big deal. Just kidding. He is in the academic circle, not the entertainment circle. Is it meaningful to think about these things? In addition to the good project research that interests him the most, everything else is just a cloud. Soon, as a large number of little wizards entered the Hogwarts Express, the flow of people in front of him dropped rapidly. Lockhart glanced at Hermione, who was still thinking, patted her shoulder gently, and said gently, "Ms. Granger, you can enter the train now." You can continue to think and list the 3 questions you think are most valuable. I will give you detailed answers later. After hearing this, Hermione was stunned for a moment and nodded heavily. Then she looked at Lockhart and watched him walk into the train. She followed him closely. Soon, Hermione followed Lockhart into the Hogwarts professor's compartment. After entering the compartment, Lockhart looked at Hermione, who was following closely behind him with some helplessness, pointed to the seat opposite, and asked her to sit down. Then, he waved his wand lightly, and soon, a cup of tea and a cup of honey were placed on the table in front of the two. Lockhart picked up the tea he had prepared earlier, took a sip, and said to Hermione opposite him, "Ms. Granger, have a glass of honey juice first. You asked so many questions in one breath just now, you must be thirsty." Hearing the hint of smile in Lockhart's tone, Hermione picked up the honey juice in front of her somewhat stiffly, took a big sip, to relieve her inattention. After seeing Hermione drink it, before she asked any questions, Lockhart wanted to take the initiative and said, "Do you know why I asked you to choose the 3 most valuable questions? I always think that the number 3 is very wonderful. It is neither too many nor too few, just right. If there are too many questions, we can only reduce the quality of our answers in order to answer all the questions, which will only reduce our gains in the end. If there are too few questions, even if we answer them seriously, it will be difficult to get the most out of them. 3 questions are just right, neither too many nor too few, which can make every wizard think seriously and give the highest quality answers. So, the correct way to ask questions should be to ask a small number of high quality questions. If you ask too many questions at once, no matter which professor you are, they will not be able to give you a high quality answer. Do you understand what I mean, Miss Granger?" Hermione was stunned for a moment, as if she was somewhat shocked by the concept shared by Professor Lockhart just now. She had never thought so much and so deeply. She just thought that the more questions she asked, the better, and the more knowledge she knew, the more secure she would feel. So, she always wanted to ask more questions and learn more knowledge. Seeing Hermione Granger's face showing a thoughtful look instead of a look of grievance, Lockhart nodded slightly. This little witch was indeed very smart and understood things quickly. Students like him in his previous life would only feel very aggrieved when they heard what he just said, as if he was just scolding them and didn't listen to his words at all. Only those good students who really put their minds to it and took his words to heart would think seriously and put them into practice. If such a student was in his previous life, he would be enough to become his research assistant. You know, he was also well known in the academic circle in his previous life, and many graduate students were willing to be his assistants. What he said to Hermione before was his educational philosophy when he was teaching at the university in his previous life. Control input. Everything should be restrained, stay rational, and don't be greedy. As the saying goes, greedy, never chew too much. In the new book period, follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top so that you can see the latest chapters. Chapter 27, The Source of Magic Cultivating Hermione. Thank you, Professor Lockhart, for your detailed explanation. I will definitely remember what you said just now. Hermione put away the notebook she had just made notes in and put it in her small bag. She said to Lockhart with a face full of excitement and gratitude. Lockhart had just answered Hermione's 3 questions and felt a little dry in the mouth. He drank a sip of tea in the cup. Hearing the gratitude in Hermione's tone, a smile appeared on his face and he said, "Okay, that's all the questions. You can go back first. Learning is important, but it also requires a combination of work and rest." As he said that, Lockhart stretched out his hand to signal Hermione to leave the professor's box reluctantly. Well, she originally planned to stay in there as long as the professor didn't speak. See if she can curry favor with him and ask some more questions. Before they met, Gilderoy Lockhart was her idol. She had already become a fan of him through the 6 books he wrote. After they met, a simple conversation made her even more of a fan. Professor Lockhart answered the questions she had just raised in great detail, and his language was vivid, and he cited several interesting cases. She understood and memorized the knowledge points very easily. Such learning efficiency and effect were exactly the same as the Golden Professor in her mind, and even exceeded it. She was much better than Professor Snape, and even Professor McGonagall was not as good as Professor Lockhart just now. Hermione Granger thought silently in her heart. Then she left the professor's box with some regret and walked towards the Gryffindor box. Lockhart looked at Hermione's leaving figure, half squinting his eyes, as if thinking about something. Through the exchange just now, it can be seen that Hermione is indeed a good seedling. He dare not completely believe in any plot. As a basic quality of a researcher, he can only make a judgment after verifying it with his own hands. However, she is a little young, and it can only be said that she has the potential for cultivation. After all, it is not uncommon for a person to be good at a young age, but not good at an adult. If she can really listen to what he said and practice it, it is not a bad idea for Lockhart to accept her as his disciple. The disciples he mentioned were not the workers he had talked about with Dumbledore before, but fellow travelers to whom he could teach Kamar-Taj magic, runes, and even bring them to the Marvel world to pursue the truth together. The study of magic could not be accomplished by one person alone. Only by gathering the power of the masses and conducting large-scale, systematic, and in-depth research can we achieve world-renowned results. This has been the case since ancient times. Just like the national treasures of his country in his previous life, nuclear bombs, atomic bombs, etc. Which one is not the power of the masses? What's more? The closer to the locomotive, the louder the sound of the train becomes. Lockhart was quite curious about how the wizard at the locomotive drove this magic train. Soon, Lockhart walked to the locomotive, looked at the bronze door opposite, and knocked 3 times. Dang. 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 Soon, the bronze door of the locomotive opened. To Lockhart's surprise, there was a house elf inside. Professor Lockhart, is there anything you need from Vada? Vada is happy to serve you. Lockhart looked down at the house elf Vada, who was wearing ragged clothes and had an ugly face. Especially when he saw it bending down fiercely, with its head almost touching the dusty ground. He frowned slightly, because he had some misophobia. Clean it up. Lockhart waved his wand lightly, and the tip of the wand flickered. In an instant, the stains on Vada's body disappeared quietly. The house elf jumped up happily when he saw that it was clean. Thank you, Professor Lockhart. Thank you so much. Looking at Vada, who wanted to get close to him, Lockhart immediately took a step back. He just had misophobia, but he had no intention of having an intimate hug with the house elf. He asked directly, Vada, are you driving this Hogwarts Express? Is there anyone else helping? No, Professor Lockhart. Hogwarts has always asked Vada to drive the express. Vada likes this job, and is very happy. Seeing Vada dancing with joy, Lockhart said in a commanding tone, Vada, take me to see the locomotive of the Hogwarts Express. Vada tilted his head, but soon nodded vigorously and replied loudly, okay, Professor Lockhart. Soon, following Vada, Lockhart bent down and entered the locomotive of the Hogwarts Express, or the control room. After entering, Lockhart looked at the space that was at least twice as spacious, and was a little surprised. This should be the Traceless extension spell cast here, Lockhart thought silently. Immediately, he looked at the center of the entire space with great interest. There was a dark purple sphere emitting a lot of magic fluctuations, and bronze pipes connected from the sphere to all directions. Lockhart guessed that the power of the entire Hogwarts Express should be this dark purple sphere, or it would be more appropriate to say the source of magic power. It emitted a lot of magic power, and the surrounding pipes should be used to circulate magic power and provide the entire express with running power. He asked Vada next to him, and got a definite answer. His guess was not wrong. When Vada drove, he actually controlled the dark purple source of magic power in the middle. The speed of the Hogwarts Express was controlled by restricting the flow of magic power. If the restrictions were completely lifted, the speed of the express would increase, and if the restrictions were strengthened, the speed would slow down. Complete restrictions would mean stopping the train completely and letting the little wizards get on or off. Lockhart walked to the source of magic power. Although he had the urge to study in his heart, he still knew the limits. So many little wizards were sitting in the train. If an accident happened because of his research, he would be in trouble. Even if Dumbledore didn't say anything, the parents of those little wizards would definitely criticize him. So, he decided to observe first and then apply to Headmaster Dumbledore for a search. As a professor, he should be easy to talk to, right? Lockhart thought silently. Suddenly, Vada next to him touched him lightly, making him come back to his senses. He looked out the window opposite in the direction of Vada's finger. Hey, why is it Harry Potter? At this moment, Harry Potter felt that he was very unlucky. He was originally happily staying with the Weasley family, preparing to enter platform 9 3/4 and then arrive at Hogwarts. In his imagination, everything should be very smooth just like last year. As a result, he and Ron couldn't enter platform 9 3/4. The Hogwarts Express was about to start, but he and Ron were trapped. What if they didn't arrive at Hogwarts on time? As a result, as if they thought of something terrible, Harry and Ron hurriedly thought of a way. Finally, the two set their sights on the magic car they were driving. Although it took a lot of trouble, the two finally found the Hogwarts Express with the magic car. As a result, the two of them were almost hit by the train, and he himself almost fell off. However, Harry, who had just come to his senses, suddenly found that he seemed to see a familiar figure on the locomotive. It seemed to be Professor Lockhart. In the new book period, the follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that you can easily see the latest chapters. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Magical Artificial Intelligence. Lockhart looked at the floating car that was almost hit by the locomotive and Harry Potter who almost fell off the car. He immediately realized it. He remembered that there seemed to be this scene in the original plot. Harry Potter couldn't make the Hogwarts Express, so he could only rely on the Weasley family's magic car. As a result, he was almost hit by the locomotive. Fortunately, Ron reacted quickly and was not hit. Otherwise, the two would really have to go to St. Mungo's Hospital. However, thinking back to the magic car he had just seen, Lockhart felt a little interested. The Weasley family is also a pure-blood family, and pure-blood families have basically been passed down for thousands of years and generally have their own background. It is said that Arthur Weasley likes to study Muggle items, and now he sees this magic car. Maybe their family's inheritance is related to alchemy. Thinking of this, Lockhart pondered for a moment, and his brain turned rapidly. He can't do the Hogwarts Express now, but the Weasley family, isn't it difficult to operate? And it just so happens that they are all fans of his books. TSK. If Lockhart doesn't make good use of such an opportunity, he will be punished by God. As for Harry Potter, who was almost in danger just now, Lockhart didn't take it to heart. Anyway, the final result was okay, and he was not Harry Potter's nanny. Why think so much? Although Harry's fighting talent was not weak, in Lockhart's eyes, to be honest, if it weren't for Harry's relationship with Voldemort, Hermione would be more valuable than Harry. At least Hermione has the potential to be cultivated into a research assistant. Well, Harry can also participate in his research, but he is just a research subject. Thinking of this, Lockhart smiled faintly. The magic of love, and the unforgivable curse, the savior born from the collision of the two. The research value is not cheap. At night, in the Hogwarts Great Hall, after Lockhart got off the Hogwarts Express, he went to his office and the lounge, to put his luggage and some books. In the future, he will probably settle in Hogwarts. Don't ask why. If the school hadn't forbidden him, he would have wanted to settle down in the library. Well, could he discuss with Dumbledore about taking a part-time librarian position, and say that he saw that the librarian, Ms. Pence, was too hardworking, and he wanted to help? If he said that, there shouldn't be any misunderstanding. Thinking about it, Lockhart sat in the professor's seat in the auditorium, watching a large number of young wizards pouring in. He sighed slightly. Isn't this just a freshman meeting? It's still the same old routine. As a university professor in his previous life, Lockhart hated the speeches given by school leaders at freshman meetings. Not only were they long, but they were full of official language, clichés, and big talk, and the tone was very passionate. When it came to asking them to allocate more research funds, the passionate energy disappeared, and he was so stingy, which was really unkind. His great research projects had to be abandoned. When he thought of this, Lockhart felt quite regretful. Thinking about it, Lockhart continued to focus on the freshman meeting at Hogwarts. Looking at the luxurious auditorium, he compared it with the university auditorium in his previous life. He had to sigh that magic was still good. It was not impossible to do such a scene in his previous life, but the cost was too high. In Hogwarts, with a light wave of the magic wand, it could be decorated so luxuriously. The whole auditorium was very bright, which was due to the tens of thousands of floating candles floating in the sky. There were also some magic chandeliers hanging above. In the middle of the auditorium, a large number of long tables were filled with little wizards, and the golden plates and silver goblets sparkled under the candlelight. However, what amazed Lockhart the most was the ceiling of the auditorium. The entire ceiling should be a magic. As long as you look up, you can see a bright and beautiful galaxy hanging in it. Lockhart was most happy about this scene of the vast starry sky. The vast universe and the tiny human beings can stimulate his curiosity. Soon, the most classic sorting scene of Hogwarts was staged under Lockhart's gaze. Professor McGonagall brought a four-corner stool to the podium, and then took a patched and somewhat worn hat, and put it on it. Seeing the sorting hat in front of him, Lockhart's desire to study rose again. It is said that the sorting hat was cast by the four founders of Hogwarts with magic, and infused with thoughts. It can judge the appropriate college for the little wizard according to his characteristics. In Lockhart's eyes, the ability to judge the college is secondary. The most important thing is that it is intelligent and can think for itself. Even if there are limitations, it also means that it has a certain computing power or deduction ability. Lockhart believes that an advanced magic civilization must have its matching computing power or deduction ability. Only in this way can magic technology be continuously innovated. In Lockhart's eyes, the sorting hat is clearly the prototype of magic artificial intelligence. As a researcher, consciously using tools is the most basic quality. The greatest role of tools is to amplify the ability of researchers hundreds or thousands of times. Well, Lockhart felt that he urgently needed an artificial intelligence to prove his professional quality. It would be best if there were a batch of gold galleons. You may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge a person by his appearance. If you can find a more beautiful hat than mine, I can eat myself. The sorting hat sang its own sorting song loudly. It was a little hoarse and a little unpleasant, and such a voice made Lockhart frown slightly. However, he still stared at the sorting hat with great appreciation. After the song was over, it was time for the sorting ceremony. Next, whoever's name I call will wear the sorting hat, sit on the stool, and wait for the sorting. Jodie Phillip. As Professor McGonagall's somewhat stern voice sounded, a large number of young wizards found their own colleges. After watching for a while, Lockhart looked around a little bored, looking at the professors sitting around him. Well, Headmaster Dumbledore has not appeared yet. Phileas Flitwick, the Professor of Charms, was a little short, just like in his memory, but his body exuded a strong magical aura. He was worthy of being a dual champion when he was young. Sybil Trelawney, the Professor of Divination, had fluffy hair and wore a dark green witch robe. There should be a bone hanging in the middle of her neck, which might be used for divination. She looked a little weird, as expected of a divination teacher. By the way, how high the recognition level must be to draw her prediction talent. However, looking at Snape, who was 3 seats away, Lockhart sighed softly, his face full of gloom and harshness, revealing a cold and mean aura. It was just that his face was short of writing 4 big words: keep away from strangers. Snape was a master of potions, and he was also planning to build a good relationship with him, obtain potions from him, and even learn how to make potions. Judging from this situation, it might be a difficult task. In the new book period, the follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top for easy access to the latest chapters. Chapter 29, Dumbledore's Request. Next, welcome our new Professor Gilderoy Lockhart, who will teach you the course of defense against the dark arts. Lockhart was a little bored just now, but when he heard Headmaster Dumbledore introduce him, he immediately perked up. He quickly stood up and bowed elegantly to the many young wizards. Clap, clap, clap. Then, amid a round of applause, Lockhart smiled brightly at the young wizards. Maybe it was because Lockhart was famous before, or because they saw Lockhart's handsome face. The young wizards applauded very fiercely. After standing for a while, Lockhart sat back in his seat, and the applause began to slowly fade. Seeing Dumbledore continue the meeting with a smile, Lockhart began to get bored again. He began to look for opportunities to chat with Professor Sprout next to him and talk to her about magical plants. Lockhart, I have to say that you brought back all the herbal knowledge you learned in school. Professor, I actually remember some herbal knowledge. Which ones? Lockhart. Well, I remember mandrake and jillyweed. Lockhart said hesitantly, looking a little embarrassed. God has mercy on me. Even the adventure experience was stolen through memory spells, and I haven't practiced combat spells for a long time. Not to mention these herbal knowledge. He himself has only been studying runes, combat spells and the like recently, and has never thought about magical plants. As a result, it didn't take long to talk, and it was exposed. But as he reacted, he immediately started to change the subject. Professor, I once saw a magical plant called golden clover. It can be used to restore magic power, and it is also a symbol of good luck. I don't know if you have seen it before. Hearing Lockhart's question, Professor Sprout recalled carefully and asked in confusion, is there really such a plant? Why haven't I heard of golden clover? Well, of course you haven't heard of it. This is a magical plant from the Marvel world. You've only heard of it. Of course, I've seen it with my own eyes. I'll contact my friend and I'll send you a copy in a while. You can study it. Lockhart's reply immediately made Professor Sprout very interested. She had to study the unknown magical plant carefully. Taking this opportunity, Lockhart quickly changed the subject and started talking about his adventures. He was quite good at this. He had written 7 books with vivid language and interesting cases. Professor Sprout immediately laughed and naturally built a relationship. He looked at the system panel quietly. Character recognition. Pomona Sprout, 3900ths. Well, we just talked for a while, and this recognition is quite good. I'll send you some magical plants from the Marvel world later. It shouldn't be a problem to reach a recognition of 50. At that time, at least rewards such as knowledge can be quickly obtained through lottery. When he thought of this, Lockhart was a little excited, and his voice slightly raised, attracting the attention of Professor McGonagall next to him. Seeing Professor McGonagall's serious look, Lockhart smiled and said, sorry, Professor McGonagall. Then he immediately lowered the voice of communicating with Professor Sprout. Snape next to him noticed this scene, glanced at it indifferently, and continued to look at the little wizards of his college. After a while, the freshman meeting in Lockhart's eyes was finally over. But what he didn't notice was that Snape and Professor McGonagall disappeared without a trace at some point. Or even if he noticed it, he didn't care, because he was only thinking about ending this boring freshman meeting as soon as possible. Finally, it was time to eat, and Lockhart was about to try the craftsmanship of Hogwarts. Picking up the fork and tapping the golden plate, a lot of food appeared on the golden plate. Lockhart started eating directly. The food at Hogwarts tasted good, although it was not as good as the food he made himself. But it was much better than that of ordinary families. After eating and drinking, all the little wizards, including the professors, were ready to go back to rest. Suddenly, Lockhart felt someone tapping his shoulder from behind. He turned his head quickly. Professor McGonagall, what's the matter? Turning around, he found that it was Professor McGonagall with a serious face. Lockhart asked in surprise. The headmaster said he has something to talk to you about. Come with me to the office. Hearing Professor McGonagall's usual old-fashioned tone, Lockhart nodded and followed her to the headmaster's office. As he walked, he thought to himself, what could it be? He didn't even go to class. The only thing he did out of the ordinary recently was to study the Hogwarts Express. He just looked at it and didn't start to dismantle it. He wouldn't be called for such a small matter. No way. Soon, the two walked into the corridor on the 8th floor and walked towards the headmaster's office. Dragon milk cheese. As Professor McGonagall said the command, the gargoyles moved to the side. Lockhart followed Professor McGonagall to the stairs and soon entered the headmaster's office again. Looking at Headmaster Dumbledore writing at his desk, Lockhart stood aside, watching quietly, while Professor McGonagall quietly left the headmaster's office. Soon, Dumbledore put down the quill in his hand, raised his head, looked at Lockhart standing next to him, and said gently, "Lockhart, you are here." "Yes, Headmaster. Is there anything I can do for you?" Lockhart nodded and asked curiously. "It's not a big deal. You can take a look at this newspaper first." Dumbledore handed Lockhart a copy of the Daily Prophet. Lockhart picked up the newspaper, and the eye-catching headline at the top was printed. 7 Muggles discovered the flying car. The Ministry of Magic dealt with it urgently. After reading the content of the Daily Prophet, Lockhart looked up with some confusion and asked Dumbledore, "Headmaster, is there anything I can help with? Isn't this an accident caused by Harry Potter? What does it have to do with him?" "Indeed, there is something I need your help with." Dumbledore nodded in some distress and said gently, "Harry caused some trouble, although it has been dealt with. But I think he needs to improve his combat experience to resist unexpected risks that may occur in the future. And you, as a professor of defense against the dark arts, are also an adventurer. You should have rich experience in this area. Can you help me develop Harry's combat experience?" Although he was a little surprised that Dumbledore wanted to do it himself, Lockhart still nodded and said, "Okay, Headmaster, but I suggest that we can hold a duel club. I can teach them some duel methods and experience, and the young wizards can practice with each other, so that the improvement effect is the best." "Well, the main reason is that, if Harry is tutored alone, he will have to solve the problems he encounters by himself, which will easily delay his research time. He doesn't have much time to begin with. If he opens a club, he just shares some methods, techniques, and experience, and they can practice on their own later. At the same time, he can also invite those professors to participate, and he can also take this opportunity to build good relationships, or learn from their experience. Why not?" Hearing Lockhart's suggestion, Dumbledore nodded slowly. "Lockhart, your suggestion is very good. You can arrange the time for the battle club by yourself. If you need any resources, you can go directly to Professor McGonagall." Hearing Dumbledore's last words, Lockhart's eyes lit up instantly. To apply for resources, just go directly to Professor McGonagall. Then he has to think about it carefully. What does he need now? No, what do the little wizards need? He is not in a hurry about the time of the battle club. He still has a long time to teach. At least, he has to get to know all the little wizards before holding it, or wait until he comes back from the Marvel world. In short, time is his, and he is not in a hurry. Then, after a few simple words, Lockhart said goodnight and left the principal's office with brisk steps. Boom. After Lockhart left, Dumbledore waved his wand lightly, and the door slammed shut. Suddenly, the portrait of Principal Black next to him asked a question. "Develop dueling experience? Albus, why don't you look for Phileas? He was a dueling champion when he was young. But look for Lockhart. P.S. Please vote for the monthly ticket. I haven't seen anyone voting for the monthly ticket for several days in a row. I ask the readers to support me. In the new book period, the reading data is extremely important. I ask the readers who like this book to pin it to the top so that you can see the latest chapters easily." Chapter 30 Lockhart with a righteous look. Facing the question from Principal Black, Dumbledore did not answer directly. Instead, he took off his half-moon glasses, wiped them gently, and said, "When I was talking to Harry just now, I discovered something. Harry was riding the Weasley family's modified flying car and almost fell off." Lockhart should have seen this scene. Hearing this, Principal Black was silent, as if waiting for Dumbledore to continue. Dumbledore sighed softly. "I talked to Lockhart before, and found that he is indeed very talented. But, I found out at that time that, apart from being passionate about magic research, he seemed to be indifferent to other things. It was as if he had been immersed in his own world, and didn't care about things that had nothing to do with him. Just like when Harry almost fell, Lockhart saw that Harry was safe, so he didn't do anything. Until just now, he didn't mention it, as if he didn't see anything." Hearing this, Principal Black who was known as the most unpopular, said with a mocking tone, "Oh, then I know. Our principal Dumbledore wants to change Lockhart in this way. Are you trying to pull him into your chariot? Dumbledore, it's still that familiar smell. Disgusting." Dumbledore smiled at Principal Black's mocking tone, put on his half-moon glasses, and didn't reply. If Lockhart heard the conversation between the two at this moment, he would probably cry out in grievance. He just knew the plot, so he didn't worry about Harry Potter at all, so he naturally wouldn't mention it. Evaluation of Dumbledore. Well, okay, he had to say that Dumbledore was very good at judging people. He hadn't finished his own business yet, so why should he care about other people? There was no benefit. Even if he had to care, he would wait until his business was done. Lockhart walked briskly towards his lounge. The more he thought about it, the more he found that the duel club that Dumbledore asked him to host had great potential. You said, if you want to run a duel club well, do you have to prepare potions to prevent the little wizards from getting hurt? Do you have to prepare corresponding magic items to train their dueling skills? Do you have to invite some other professors to set an example for them in dueling? A series of preparations emerged in his mind. Although it was a bit much, it made him feel very happy. He liked this kind of work, and especially liked to exchange dueling experiences with the little wizards. Oh my god, such a good opportunity. As long as Professor McGonagall passed the application, as the organizer and founder of the club, he could get these resources in advance and make reasonable plans. Isn't it a very reasonable thing? Of course, Dumbledore couldn't find fault. As long as Dumbledore's task is completed, even if there are some minor mistakes in the process, he will not say much. After all, if the water is too clear, there will be no fish. If you want a horse to run fast, how can you feed it more food and grass? Lockhart thought about it, and his mouth curled up slightly. He had already listed a list of resources in his brain. It depends on how he can persuade Professor McGonagall to sign. Late at night, Hogwarts. Squeak. With a subtle sound, the door of Lockhart's lounge quietly opened. Lockhart walked out of his lounge and quietly closed the door. Looking at the empty and quiet corridor, Lockhart nodded with satisfaction. Then hide your body. Lockhart took the wand in his hand and touched his body lightly. The tip of the wand flashed slightly. After an illusion spell, his figure disappeared quietly. Looking at himself who had successfully become invisible, Lockhart felt a little excited. When you come to Hogwarts, the most classic night tour project must be experienced. Of course, night tour is not the purpose. The most important thing is the room of requirement. Hogwarts has many magical places, among which the room of requirement is definitely one of the best. If we talk about the pinnacle of magic in the Harry Potter world, Lockhart believes that the magic castle of Hogwarts deserves it. And the most magical place in the whole school is the room of requirement. He was quite curious about it a long time ago. The technology in the previous life was typical materialism, emphasizing that matter determines consciousness. The magic in this life is typical idealism, emphasizing that consciousness determines matter. The room of requirement changes with the user's consciousness, showing the wonders of the magic in the Harry Potter world vividly. In Lockhart's opinion, if he can study the room of requirement thoroughly, his magic will be qualitatively improved. Therefore, before coming to Hogwarts, he had sorted out 9 conjectures for the principle of change of the room of requirement. Prepare to verify them one by one and study them slowly. Well, if possible, he feels that he can live in the room of requirement. With his mind turning, Lockhart walked quietly into the corridor. It was late at night, and Hogwarts seemed particularly quiet at night. If Lockhart hadn't cast a silencing spell on himself, footsteps would have been heard in the distance. 3rd floor. 4th floor. Lockhart took 2 steps at a time, and his steps were brisk, constantly moving towards the higher floors. The room of requirement was on the 8th floor. He remembered that it was related to a tapestry, but he was not sure which tapestry it was. However, when he went to the principal's office before, he saw a tapestry of a giant beating up a fool Barnabas with a stick. It was also the largest tapestry in the corridor on the 8th floor. He guessed that the entrance to the room of requirement might be related to this tapestry. Even if it wasn't, it didn't matter. He had counted them in his mind before. There were only 5 tapestries in the entire corridor on the 8th floor. At most, he would have to experiment 4 times. The entrance would definitely be found. It would only take some time. Well, he made detailed preparations for the room of requirement. As Lockhart kept reviewing his plans, a faint smile floated on his face. He liked the feeling of being in control of everything. Suddenly, ta-da-da, Lockhart had just reached the 6th floor when a burst of hurried footsteps suddenly rang in his ears. "George, run quickly, Snape is coming. Go forward, go past 2 intersections, turn left, there is a passage, you can go there. Yes, yes." Lockhart hid himself, watching the twins George and Fred running in front of him, and heard the 2 people talking quickly. His face changed slightly. Damn. It's late at night. Snape, you are a professor after all. Why don't you sleep well and come out to fool around? Lockhart cursed inwardly and quickly followed George and Wes behind to avoid Snape. If his transfiguration charm was discovered by Snape, the scene would be very embarrassing. However, the more Lockhart walked, the more he felt that something was wrong, and he always felt that something was wrong. Then, he turned a corner behind George and Wes. Suddenly, bang, Lockhart patted his head, and an embarrassed look appeared on his face. "I was so stupid. I'm not a student, I'm a professor. When students go out at night, it's called night wandering, which violates school rules. It's reasonable for them to be afraid of being caught by professors. But when professors go out at night, it's not called night wandering, it's called working hard." Immediately, Lockhart touched his body with his wand and untied the dissiparation spell. Then Wingardium Leviosa. Lockhart waved his wand, and George and Weasley, who were running in front, were instantly controlled by the levitation spell, and floated in front of Lockhart. He glanced at the struggling George and Weasley twins and felt their resentful eyes. He looked at Professor Snape who was walking towards him. Lockhart said righteously, "Professor Snape, I caught 2 little wizards wandering at night. What do you think we should do? P.S. Please vote for the monthly ticket. I haven't seen anyone vote for the monthly ticket for several days in a row. In the new book period, the follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that you can see the latest chapters." Chapter 31 Negotiation Skills. Lockhart's experience. "Professor Lockhart, please let me go. This is my first time." "Yes, Professor Lockhart, I won't dare to do it again next time." The 2 little lions George and Fred's whispers for mercy floated in his ears, and a faint smile appeared on Lockhart's face, pretending that he didn't hear it at all. "Are you kidding? It's the first time. If it's your first time, I will eat my wand." Snape was slightly surprised by Lockhart's behavior, but he didn't think much about it. Like a big bat, he looked at George and Fred, the 2 little wizards, with the eyes of a prey, and said in his cold and sarcastic tone, "Look, it's another little wizard from Gryffindor. Because you violated the rules of night travel, Gryffindor will be deducted 30 points for this. At the same time, as a punishment, come to my office on Saturday at noon to deal with slugs." After hearing Professor Snape's punishment, George and Fred lowered their heads dejectedly and did not refute, as if they knew that for Snape, the more they refuted, the more severe the punishment would be. After hearing Professor Snape's punishment, Lockhart looked serious, not embarrassed at all for his previous behavior. He said to the 2 seriously, "Since Professor Snape has punished you, I won't say much. Be careful next time." Then, he untied the floating spell on the 2 and signaled George and Fred to go back to the Gryffindor common room. The 2 looked at each other listlessly, sighing and turning to Gryffindor. But what the 2 professors didn't notice was that when they turned a corner and disappeared from their sight, George and Fred looked at each other, swept away the dejection in front of them, and quickly adjusted their direction and ran towards another secret passage, getting farther and farther away from the Gryffindor common room. As for Gryffindor's score, I'll earn it later, when I have time. Anyway, there are others. Having fun is the most important thing, and night tours are the happiest. Professor Snape glanced at the 2 people leaving, and didn't say much. Instead, he asked Lockhart indifferently, "Professor Lockhart, why are you here?" Lockhart, who had already prepared a plan, showed a flattering smile, and said somewhat flatteringly, "Before, Professor Dumbledore asked me to prepare a battle club. to cultivate the combat experience of young wizards. I thought about it. Professor Snape, as a professor of potions, you have rich experience in fighting dark wizards, so I would like to invite you to join. Hearing this, Professor Snape obviously showed a trace of impatience on his face and refused coldly. Sorry, Professor Lockhart, I'm a little busy. You should invite other professors to your battle club. With that, he walked straight past Lockhart and walked forward. Lockhart was not surprised by Snape's refusal. He trotted after him and kept saying in Snape's ear, Professor Snape, I think this duel is very important for the little wizard. According to my previous investigation, I found that the little wizards in the 3rd and 4th grades don't know how to fight at all. They are very unfamiliar with spells such as disarming spells and combat spells. They lack combat experience and have no basic combat awareness. Even wizards in the 5th and 6th grades face a large number of naughty goblins. Not to mention the little wizards in the 1st grade. Facing Lockhart stumbling, Snape became more and more impatient and even had the idea of casting a silent spell on Lockhart. Unfortunately, Hogwarts can't cast apparition. Seeing Snape's unfriendly look, Lockhart raised the corner of his mouth and paused for a moment, as if giving Snape time to think. Then Professor Snape, if you still don't want to join the dueling club, I'm really sorry, but Professor Dumbledore asked me to apply for some resources for the duel for young wizards. As for the potion part, we will talk about it in detail later. Look, is it okay? Thank God, the chattering Professor Lockhart in his ear finally stopped. Professor Snape thought briefly and felt that what Dumbledore asked should be no problem. In addition, this Lockhart was too annoying. So he immediately replied, okay, Professor Lockhart, let's make an appointment to talk later. I have something else to do. I'll go first. After saying that, Snape quickened his pace and walked towards his office. Lockhart behind him slowed down his pace and looked at the figure of Snape in front of him with a faint smile on his face. It seems that the experience of studying funds in the previous life is still quite useful. Sure enough, I'm still as good as ever. If you want to open the window, you must first poke through the roof. The roof naturally cannot be pierced, so the window must be able to be opened. First, propose an excessive request, and the other party will definitely refuse the request. After the other party refuses, propose a compromise plan. Due to the previous rejection, the chance of passing will be greatly increased. In his previous life, he asked for research funds in this way. In this life, he asked for potion resources in this way. Although the routine is a bit old-fashioned, the effect has always been outstanding. He didn't expect to pull Snape into his duel club. Just kidding. After pulling him in, he will have to let him handle the potion resources in the club. Then how can he embezzle? No, make reasonable use of resources. Now, with this relationship, it should be no problem to get money from Professor Snape later, right? Maybe he can find an opportunity for his second bottle of Felixie from Professor Snape. While thinking, he walked back to his lounge with a brisk pace. As for the room of requirement, there is no hurry. He just met Snape when he was about to explore, which means that Mercury is retrograde today. He will wait a few days for better luck. In short, he is not in a hurry. Time is on his side. Early in the morning, Professor Lockhart's lounge. At this moment, Lockhart was sorting out the first class of the day on his desk. His first class, by coincidence, was for the first year wizards who had just joined Hogwarts. He planned to leave a deep impression on these little wizards. Although the students this time were all 11-year-old little wizards, unlike the adult college students he taught before. But with 12 years of teaching experience, he was well versed in some routines, techniques, or the essence of teaching. If the time before the time travel is included, Lockhart calculated that he had not taught students for nearly half a year. After calculating the time and thinking about the content of the course to be taught today, he suddenly felt itchy, or to be more precise, itchy mouth. After a while, Lockhart sorted out the lesson plan he had prepared and put it in the space bag on his waist. Then he opened the door and walked towards the Hogwarts cafeteria. Lectures are important, but you can't miss eating. By the way, the cooking skills of the Hogwarts house elves are pretty good, and he has to taste them well. He wants to take the essence and discard the dross and add some brilliance to his gourmet journey. Chapter 30 To the shock of the little wizards. Hogwarts, Defense Against the Dark Arts Classroom. For first year wizards, today is the first day of school. Especially for the wizards from Ravenclaw and Slytherin, this is the first class. So, this group of wizards came to the classroom early and found a seat they liked. Looking down from the podium, there are 3 rows in total. The wizards on the left are all wearing dark blue wizard robes with a soaring eagle tattooed on their chests. They are all Ravenclaw wizards. The wizards on the right are basically wearing dark green wizard robes with a glaring snake tattooed on their chests, typical of Slytherin. In the middle, the colors are a bit mixed, but most of the wizards sitting in the front are blue, that is, the wizards from Ravenclaw. The reason why they were sorted into Ravenclaw by the sorting hat is that they are full of love for knowledge and learning. It is natural for them to sit in the front and listen carefully to the teacher's lectures. And behind is a green, which is Slytherin College. Most of them are pure-blood families. In other words, most of their parents are either powerful, rich, or both. The wizards of Slytherin College advocate mysterious magic, higher status, and their blood, so they are more likely to have strong ambitions. It can be said that ambition is a standard of Slytherin wizards. Therefore, there is a serious sense of separation in the whole classroom. Ravenclaw students communicated with each other alone, and the same was true for Slytherin students. For a moment, it can be clearly seen that wizards of the 2 colors of clothes did not communicate with each other. At most, they looked at each other curiously, and then whispered to their companions. Alice Eudora, the little witch from Ravenclaw College who was sitting in the front middle, whispered to Brooke Warner, whom she had just met. "Brooke, what magic do you know? Are you a muggle wizard?" The little wizard Brooke nodded. "Yes, Alice, I just knew magic not long ago, and I haven't mastered any magic yet. What about you? Are you a muggle too? Do you know magic?" "No, my parents are wizards, and they taught me magic," Alice said in a low voice. Seeing Brooke's envious eyes, she said with some regret, "But I don't know much magic. I only know a shining charm and a levitation charm, and I'm not good at the levitation charm." "That's not bad, at least better than me. I don't even know a single magic." Brooke's eyes were a little envious. "Alice, what magic do you think Professor Lockhart will teach us? I heard that he is an adventurer. He has published so many books, so he must know a lot of magic." Alice looked down at the textbook in front of her, especially the moving figure on the cover, and nodded heavily. "Yes, my mother is his fan," she said. "Professor Herahut is amazing. I'm really looking forward to it." As time passed slowly, it was soon time for class. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. The bell rang, and the class began. Although the teacher had not yet appeared on the podium, most of the little wizards sat upright. Suddenly, buzz, a subtle sound sounded, and a rune quietly appeared in the air. The light disappeared instantly, as if it was swallowed up. Darkness filled the entire classroom. The classroom seemed to be cast under a spell, silent and dark. Before the little wizards could react, suddenly, a beam of light appeared in the front, shining on the podium in the front. They subconsciously set their eyes on the front. At this moment, a figure covered by a beam of light and wearing an emerald green robe quietly appeared in front of all the little wizards. Then, a gentle voice sounded in the ears of every little wizard, calming down all the panicked little wizards. "Good morning, little wizards of Hogwarts. I'm your Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Gilderoy Lockhart." As he spoke, Lockhart quietly walked down the podium, and at the same time, the beam of light slowly moved. "I'm the recipient of the Order of Merlin, 3rd class." While speaking, Lockhart gently waved his wand, and a bronze ring of metals quietly emerged in the darkness. Reflecting in the eyes of all the little wizards, they could clearly see that there was an Arabic number 3 in the middle of the metal. The top read Merlin's order, and the bottom read to Gilderoy Lockhart. While seeing this scene, although they didn't know what the Order of Merlin was, they still subconsciously exclaimed. Then at the same time, "I'm also an honorary member of the Anti-Dark Magic League." As Lockhart moved slowly, the light and shadow of the Order of Merlin slowly disappeared, and what came into the eyes of the little wizard was a picture of Lockhart fighting a dark wizard. In the picture, the dark wizard had a ferocious look on his face, holding a wand and constantly attacking Lockhart, and red beams of light mixed with green light attacked Lockhart. Lockhart dodged very elegantly, and launched a powerful counterattack. Soon, a red disarming spell beam hit the wand in the hand of the dark wizard. After the wand was knocked away, Lockhart waved the wand lightly, and a silver white beam of light appeared on the surface of the dark wizard's body, binding it and falling to the ground, allowing it to struggle continuously, but its hands and feet were still unable to move. Lockhart walked in front, holding the wand in the posture of a winner and gently pointing at the head of the dark wizard. This scene made all the little wizards exclaim again, especially those from pure-blood families or half-blood wizards who grew up hearing the horror of dark wizards. This scene shocked them in their hearts, and was hard to forget for a long time. Soon after the picture appeared, Lockhart's voice sounded in their ears again. "You can call me Professor Lockhart. In the future, I will teach you how to fight with." Lockhart waved his wand lightly. Troll. The picture changed again. In front of the little wizard, a huge, ferocious, ugly, shabby, and stick-holding troll appeared. Werewolf. The little wizard heard another word. The picture changed, the troll disappeared, and was replaced by a werewolf with strong limbs, covered with grey hair, a ferocious face, and a bloody mouth. Vampire. The voice sounded, the picture changed, the werewolf disappeared, and a slender figure appeared, with huge bat-like wings spread out behind him, floating in the air, and making a pounce. The vampire was bloody, with dark red fingers on both hands, sharp nails, ugly face, and 2 ferocious fangs on both sides of the mouth. Almost every change in the picture made the little wizard exclaim again. Seeing the reaction of the little wizard, Lockhart nodded slightly. He knew that it was time to end it. Too many monster scenes would also bring aesthetic fatigue. So in Fight with the Black Wizard, the picture fell, and all the little wizards saw a large number of little wizards wearing school uniforms of 4 colleges riding flying brooms, holding wands in their hands, and constantly casting spells to fight with the black wizards on the ground. A large number of red, purple, black, and even green spell beams floated down from the sky. The black wizards on the ground were beaten and fled in panic. Such a scene made them laugh out loud. Haha. Lockhart heard the crisp laughter of the little wizards and showed a smile on his face. With a thought, he controlled the hanging ring on his hand, and the rune floating in the air flickered slightly, slowly releasing the light that was originally swallowed. The whole classroom was slowly filled with light again. At this time, Lockhart walked to the podium and bent down slightly very elegantly. All the young wizards looked ahead with surprise, and Lockhart's gentle voice sounded in their ears. As the professor of defense against the dark arts, my duty is to enable each of you young wizards to have the ability to protect yourself. In the new book period, the follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that you can see the latest chapters. Chapter 33 Speechless about the Pureblood family. Lockhart looked at the group of little wizards below with his mouth slightly opened, a surprised expression on his face, and a faint smile on his face. This scene just now was carefully designed by him. First, he used runes to absorb all the light, and then cast the flash spell to form the effect of a light column. It was like the stars and singers standing on the stage in his previous life, so as to catch the attention of all the little wizards. Then, through the illusion spell, he projected the carefully constructed pictures in his brain into this dark classroom. Things like trolls, vampires, werewolves and even dark wizards were all illusions. Well, the original body did not have these memories. They were all virtual scenes carefully constructed by Lockhart, based on the knowledge, memory, and imagination he had mastered during this period, including the battle with the Dark Wizard. He benchmarked it against the battle between Harry Potter and Voldemort in the 7th grade in the movie. It just made his own strength and elegance more prominent. Today's scene is actually benchmarked against the promotional film of the previous life, or the special effects blockbuster. However, the promotional video in the previous life was aimed at a school or a product, while this time he targeted himself. His purpose was to completely grasp the psychology of these little wizards. These little wizards had just come into contact with magic, and were in a stage of strong curiosity about magic. What he had to do was to completely stimulate the interest of these little wizards in magic. On the one hand, as a professor, whether in the previous life or this life, he liked good students more, and naturally hoped that his students would listen carefully and learn magic well. This is the basic quality of a teacher. On the other hand, Lockhart also wanted to establish the sense of identity of these little wizards. Later, no matter what these little wizards learned, or what magic knowledge they mastered, he could quickly obtain it. In addition, a new magic system will be born in the future world, which requires the acceptance and recognition of a large number of wizards. Recognize the new magic concept, and accept the new way of casting. And this must start with the little wizards. Therefore, he naturally has to be careful. Maybe these little wizards will become his helpers in the future. Thinking of this, Lockhart's smile became even brighter. Okay, today is your first defense against the dark arts class. Lockhart didn't think for long, and quickly came to his senses, and said to the little wizards who were looking expectant, I think everyone should have known me just now. Now, it's time for me to get to know you. The next step is to call the roll. As he said that, Lockhart picked up the roll call book in his hand, smiled at the little wizard sitting below and said, whoever's name is called, please stand up and briefly introduce yourself. Let everyone get to know you too. First, please welcome our little wizard Alice Eudora to briefly introduce herself to everyone. Alice was surprised to hear Professor Lockhart calling her name. She quickly stood up and asked Professor Lockhart in a panic, Professor Lockhart, my name is Alice Eudora, and I'm from Ravenclaw College. Don't be in a hurry, Alice, take your time, and briefly talk about what you like. Have you mastered magic? What kind of magic are you interested in? Lockhart looked a little flustered, his face slightly flushed, and his voice was full of the childishness of the little witch Alice, and he quickly said comfortingly, okay, Professor. Lockhart's soft voice seemed to give great comfort to the somewhat flustered Alice. Although Alice's voice was still childish, she soon calmed down, and even introduced with some excitement, Professor, I like to eat dragon milk cheese and chocolate frogs. My mother bought them for me. I like them the most. I have mastered 2 magic spells, one is the Shining Charm, and the other is a Levitation Charm. I hope to learn more powerful magic in the future and defeat those monsters that appeared in the screen just now. I especially like the scene of Professor Lockhart fighting just now. I like it very much. Haha. Hearing Alice's innocent words, Lockhart laughed heartily. Actually, I also like to eat magic snacks. Dragon milk cheese tastes really good. I will bring you some next time I have a chance. As long as you study hard in the future, I will teach you a series of useful and interesting spells. Then you can go on adventures with your companions and fight monsters. Hearing Lockhart's promise, Alice's originally nervous and slightly flushed face immediately showed a bright smile. Thank you, Professor Lockhart. By the way, Professor, let me tell you a little secret. My mother is also a fan of your books. She has collected all your books and I like to read them too. Ha ha ha. Hearing Alice's whisper, as if she was telling a secret, Lockhart laughed out loud, with a bright smile on his face. Suddenly, he felt that the little wizard was much better than those adult students. Most of the students in his previous life knew how to make him angry. When he asked him to do a project or write a paper, he would procrastinate and make mistakes from time to time. He had to use his special tricks to make it work. Although the little witch Alice in front of him was still a child, she was very cute and interesting. Well, in the previous life, she should have been a cute baby. Haha. Then, Lockhart stretched out his hand to signal Alice to sit down, and then named a name. Dennis Farley soon, a little wizard from Slytherin College wearing a dark green robe stood up elegantly. Lockhart looked at the pureblood wizard from the welfare family in front of him, and saw that his posture showed an elegant atmosphere unique to ancient nobles. He nodded slightly. It was indeed a pureblood family. No matter what, they were more strict than ordinary families in terms of child training. Look, in ordinary wizard families, who would train standing posture for no reason? Only those pureblood families would train these, because of the so-called aristocratic etiquette. Dennis, can you briefly introduce yourself? Although Lockhart looked down on pureblood families, he still said gently, after all, children are always innocent. As a university professor, if you can't see through this, then you have lived in vain. Well, this point definitely does not imply Snape's meaning. Dennis Farley stood up, as if recalling what his father had taught him, and said in a tone that was unique to the nobility, slowly but with a hint of pride, hello, Professor Lockhart. I'm from the Farley family, one of the 28 holy pureblood families, and I'm a wizard from Slytherin College. I like all kinds of powerful magic. I will inherit our Farley family in the future and hope to lead the family to greatness again. I'm very happy to meet Professor Lockhart. It is an honor for our Slytherin college to have a well-known adventurer like you to teach us the defense against the dark arts course. Lockhart heard what Dennis had just said and the slightly arrogant tone of the nobility and shook his head slightly. Well, he took back what he had just said. Not all little wizards are as cute as Alice. He was speechless about this group of pureblood families, and he still clung to the old way. What has a good child become? The family environment is crucial for the growth of children. However, this child can be trained slowly later. He was a teacher, so he didn't need to be angry with the little wizards. At most, he felt a little speechless towards the parents of these little wizards. After a few simple compliments, Dennis sat down with a smile on his face. Then, Lockhart called out the names one by one, slowly getting familiar with the name, appearance, hobbies, magic skills, and family environment of each little wizard. Moulton Carter Betsy Murphy. In the new book period, the reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that you can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 34. Thank you readers for your support of this book and the updates. Thank you for your support for this book during this period. Tomorrow, this book will have a trial push and will officially enter the recommendation process of Gideon. Well, I sincerely hope that all the recommendation processes of Gideon can be completed. Before that, I would also like to thank the readers who have been following and voting for this book, monthly tickets, and rewards during this period. Without your support during this period, the time for the trial push may have to be postponed, which will undoubtedly miss the best recommendation opportunity and cast a shadow on the future of this book. Therefore, Xingchen is very grateful for your support during this period and hopes that friends who like this book can continue to follow, speak, and vote for recommendations. If it is a reward and monthly ticket, it would be the best. Secondly, regarding the update that everyone wants to know most, during the new book period, basically most authors maintain 2 chapters of updates, especially for newbies like us who have just joined Gideon. This is all for the most precious new book period. Otherwise, with my previous writing speed on other websites, even during the new book period, I maintained the level of 5 chapters. Please rest assured, the author is a full-time writer and is currently accumulating manuscripts. If the data of all aspects of this book is good enough, at least 20 chapters will be updated when it is put on the shelves, and the state of 10 chapters will be maintained for several days. Well, I have a goal, that is, to update a total of 60 chapters in a row during the days when it is put on the shelves. I will work towards this goal, and I hope everyone can support me to achieve this goal. Haha. Of course, if everyone actively supports this book, it would not be appropriate not to add more chapters during the new book period. I thought about it. If the number of monthly tickets can reach 300, then add 1 chapter. If it can reach 500, then add another chapter. If it can reach 1000, I will definitely add 2 chapters to celebrate. Well, although I feel that this is a bit delusional, but I'm still delusional. In terms of rewards, if the first 10,000 reward starting coins appear, then add 1 chapter, and then add 1 chapter at the 3 nodes of 20,000, 50,000, and 80,000. Don't stop me, I still want to be delusional. Finally, it is about the list of people who have been supporting this book during this period, voting for monthly tickets, recommendation tickets, and rewards. I carefully sorted out the nicknames of each reader, but due to the large number of nicknames, there may be errors and omissions. If you find that I have written them wrong or missed them, please point them out in time, and I will correct them immediately. Press and hold the name to make a paragraph or chapter review, and I can see it immediately. This is not meant to cheat the chapter review, because there are too many people. I sorted them out according to the background. The order of the nicknames on the list is random, and only the nicknames are kept. Other data will not be counted. At the same time, it includes both Gideon and questions reading. Thank you again for your support. Xingchen will work hard to ensure the quality of this book and ensure continuous updates. The list of readers who support this book, statistics are as of 2022.6.11, 950. Tear up the champion Gudako with your hands. Do you want to climb a mountain the kind that comes from behind? Chasing Me with Dreams, Literary 123,456. Xiaobei, Hell, Swordsman, Eternal Foam, Super Handsome in the Young Age, Yiking Jushi, Gifty, Cooking Wine Around the Fire, Desire Blood Demon 1, Night the Encounter, Yabuai, Pilasaurachi Princess, JJC 1221, Omo 233, A Cynical Intoxicator Covering the Green Lamp, Rungless, Skin Ghost, Witchcraft, A Nature. Gainy 0, LIGHT $KUAISI $ARROW, Gigi Fujiga, Book Friend 201906010904099643, Struggling with What Name to Choose, Nickname 223, Panhaeor, 10 Perfect Big Beard. Book Friend 161,002,041,612,254 Book Friends 2018110220434231 Book Friends 202205031705233330 Book Friends 854 **** 118 Cheyenne Lin Simple Life for the Homebody Unintentional Sacrifice Fragrant Grass Xiaobei Yang Many First Class Salted Fish 1 page loss. Yuji Kintoki Rice Moonbird Really Out of Powers Imaji Yang Chan Gao Liang Baocho and Tartarus Dream God Non-Fashion Master Gifty Diving Wow Tao Summer to Yunnan Destiny Nerve Black Brilliant Dragon Flame Vast Clouds Misty Beautiful Starry Sky Meeting Fragrant Grass Sum of Snow My Seoru Cannot Match Book Friends 2018110220434231 Non-Fashion Master Extracurricular Lover L Diving Wow Tao Morning and Evening Book Friends 2017123113590281 Yuan Shishayans and Stage First Forum Forecast Says Nightwind 1991 Book Friends 202201141917401140 Zioao Desert Book Friends 2020503170523330 Gifty Mushroom Cat Luoz King Poo Rungless Worry Free Fan Book Friends 160,607,122,524,927 Book Friends 2018082220200946 Book Friends 2021120222175048 Hibiki 7231 Strangers Eddie No Man's Land Suite Zhangzi dipped in soy sauce Say certain scientific railgun forever There is an uncle called Wu and Jun Mamao and a lifetime of ties and obsession Iraga Kiwui as Mind LMMD Book Friends 2017021209381389 Book Friends 2020092923101815 Ink Dying in Lin Hujin Love Sanson Kuno Yikeo Yazio Zio Ubeo Thank you for your support of this book. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 The Weir Light Winds. Hogwarts. Defense against the Dark Arts Classroom. Lockhart looked at the still enthusiastic little wizards below, with a faint smile on his face. After the self-introduction just now, more than half of the class time has passed. Later, he asked the little wizards about their various doubts about defense against the dark arts according to the lesson plan. Then he answered their doubts one by one, and at the same time, incorporated his own adventures into them, striving to make the process of answering questions interesting and informative, and to have cases as much as possible. Sometimes when he was excited, he would wave his wand, to outline short but wonderful pictures. The whole class was very lively, with the laughter of the little wizards everywhere. Lockhart secretly looked at the recognition of these little wizards for him. Well, basically all of them reached above 40, and even a group of little wizards had risen to 50, and the first one, Alice, had reached 62. This means that basically all the young wizards have a good recognition of him, and even some of them are far superior to ordinary people, respecting, liking, and trusting Lockhart from the bottom of their hearts. This shows that his previous efforts have not been in vain. For first-year wizards, The most important thing is to improve their interest in magic. This is the most important thing. For them, interest is the best teacher. Once these young wizards are interested, they will spontaneously study magic seriously. At that time, Lockhart can also pick out some good seedlings from them and cultivate them seriously. However, Lockhart looked down at his watch. It is now 10:56. That means the class is about to end. The course arrangement of Hogwarts is very different from that of the elementary school in the previous life. Hogwarts usually only has one big class in the morning, which is from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the morning. And a big class can be divided into two small classes. There are two big classes in the afternoon, from 1300 hours to 1500 hours and 1530 to 1730 respectively. Sometimes, there is a big class from 1900 hours to 2100 hours in the evening. However, the frequency is generally not high. Most of the time, it is the evening astronomy class, or the Quidditch training time for seniors. Lockhart complained about this when he knew it. These little wizards have to go to class in the evening. Isn't it a bit inhumane? If it doesn't work, you can fill the morning class. Now, his first class is about to end. These little wizards will take a break, and it will be time for lunch. Thinking of this, Lockhart said gently to the little wizards below, "It's almost time to end the get out of class. Finally, I will leave you a preview task. Everyone must preview it carefully. I will randomly check in the next class. If you answer the questions I asked correctly, there will be a mysterious reward." Hearing this, the little wizards below suddenly realized that the get out of class was about to end, and they felt reluctant to leave. It was really that the story Lockhart told just now was very nice, and it was accompanied by pictures, as if watching a movie. It was quite interesting. Hearing Lockhart's last words, they all nodded in agreement. They were quite curious about the professor's mysterious reward. This group of little wizards were very satisfied with meeting the professor of defense against the dark arts on the first day of class today. They were full of longing for the professors of the magic classes that followed, hoping that they would be as humorous as Professor Lockhart, tell stories that were nice and interesting. Well, in fact, Lockhart saw the afternoon classes of this group of little wizards. They had a potion class with Snape from 1530 to 1730 in the afternoon. TSK. Lockhart estimated that after this class, they might miss their own classes even more. It was true. There is no harm without comparison. As the bell rang, Lockhart left homework and waved his wand. All the little wizards walked out of the classroom. Lockhart was also ready to return to his office. He had to prepare again. According to the schedule, there was another defense against the dark arts class for the 4th grade this afternoon. If I remember correctly, the Weirlight Twins who were caught by him last night and sacrificed to Snape were in this class. In the afternoon, in the defense against the dark arts classroom. Class hasn't started yet, but wizards from Gryffindor and Slytherin have already arrived. George and Fred, who were sitting in the back row, were wearing identical grey robes, with identical red hair, identical freckles, and identical faces. It was almost impossible to tell who was George and who was Fred. At this moment, the two were sitting in the back, whispering. "George, have you heard? Professor Lockhart's lectures are very interesting." "I know, Fred, he's very gentle in class." "Really? He caught us yesterday." "I doubt it, but they did say so during dinner." "I hope it's true as they said." "Yes, a gentle teacher is not afraid of being caught." "You're right, George. Did you bring the quick acting skipping candy this time?" "I did, but I only have one." "Me too. Do you know when to use it?" "I know." As they spoke, the identical Weirlight Twins looked at each other and laughed at each other. At this time, Dylan Mellon, who was also a Gryffindor sitting in front of them, turned his head and glanced at George and Fred who were laughing. They looked strange and turned their heads silently. "I don't know what these two funny guys are going to do next." Immediately, he took out the textbook and put it on the table. Looking at the moving Lockhart on the cover, an expectant look appeared on his face. He was a fan of Lockhart's books before. This time, he was so happy to hear that Lockhart would come to Hogwarts to work. Not to mention that many young wizards were talking about their idol Lockhart at noon today, which made him more expectant. As the class bell rang quietly, the wizards of Gryffindor and Slytherin showed their expectations. They have all heard about the scenes encountered by the first year wizards. After Darkness, it is a special effects blockbuster. Unfortunately, after waiting for a long time, it seems that nothing has changed. The only change is Professor Lockhart, who came in from the door, and a thick stack of test papers floating in the air following closely behind. Although Lockhart maintained a gentle smile on his face, all the young wizards suddenly felt uneasy, especially George and Fred, who were sitting in the back row. They looked at each other. They seemed to have seen Professor Lockhart looking at them. Coupled with the thick test papers floating in the air, they immediately had a bad feeling. So the two of them took out a piece of two-color chewing gum from their back pockets. One end was orange and the other end was dark purple. Then they lowered their heads and quickly ate the orange end. Suddenly, the two stood up and shouted, "Professor Lockhart, no, my stomach is uncomfortable." In the new book period, the follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that they can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 36. Lockhart is forced to kill a chicken to scare the monkeys. Lockhart brought the test paper he had prepared before, and just as he entered the classroom, he looked at the little wizards present. Looking at their expectant eyes, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He didn't know what these little wizards were thinking yet. Unfortunately, wizards of different ages naturally received different levels of treatment. The first and second grade little wizards had just started school, and some of them even had a vague understanding of magic, so it was necessary to mobilize their interest in magic. And his special effects blockbuster was specially prepared for the first grade little wizards. He didn't even prepare it for the second grade, let alone the fourth grade little wizards. For this group of little wizards who have been in school for 3 years, their understanding and attitude towards magic have become solidified. Therefore, the most important thing is to learn knowledge. And he carefully prepared a test paper, all of which were the knowledge points they had learned and mastered before. Before class, he needed to make a rough estimate. Although he knew that these little wizards had a poor foundation in the defense against the dark arts class. But there are different levels. How weak these little wizards are needs to be carefully measured. At that time, according to their real level, they should maintain their learning intensity. Although he does not approve of the cramming learning in his previous life, he has to admit that it is very effective. In the current environment, it is undoubtedly the best choice. They will take the exam next year. If they don't make up for it at this time, are they waiting to fail? To be honest, the 5th graders are the worst, and the 4th graders are better. Because the 5th graders are really about to face the OWL exam, which directly determines whether they can participate in the subsequent NEWT courses, get certificates, and graduate smoothly. In comparison, the OWL exam is equivalent to the high school entrance examination in the previous life. If you fail the high school entrance examination, you can only go back and retake it for a year. Don't think about high school and the college entrance examination. Do you think this is important? Lockhart is still responsible for the students' grades. As a university professor in his previous life, he had strict requirements on the grades of the college students below and did not fool around like other teachers. Well, this stems from the rigor he pursues when doing research, which also affects his way of thinking and his requirements for all aspects. However, he just stepped onto the podium. Suddenly, 2 identical voices rang out from below. "Professor Lockhart, it's bad. My stomach feels uncomfortable." Lockhart looked at the source of the voice, his mouth twitching slightly. It was the weird light twins he had sacrificed to Snape before. Looking at the pale faces of the twins, bending over, holding their stomachs, and looking as if they were about to vomit, he shook his head helplessly. Since he knew that these two were the 2 world-renowned live treasures of Harry Potter and prank experts, he had already thought of the possible scenes that might occur when facing the 2 in class in the future. But he didn't expect that these 2 would dare to skip class when he was in the first class. Did they not take him, Lockhart, seriously? Facing the loud shouts of the 2, it seemed as if he was facing great pain. Lockhart looked indifferent, just looking at the 2, but didn't speak. After a while, until he saw that the 2 seemed to be about to reach their limit, he spoke lightly, with a hint of seriousness in his tone. "George, we ally. Fred, we ally. As your defense against the dark arts professor, you don't need to go to the infirmary for this little problem. I can solve it. As he said that, he waved his wand lightly. Wingardium Leviosa. A levitation spell directly controlled the two to fly in front of him. Then he slightly controlled the ring on his right hand to draw a circle. In an instant, a red ring appeared in the space, and a large number of red silk threads and a rune automatically appeared in the ring. Rune purification! Exclamation mark. The red ring, under Lockhart's control, quickly enveloped the two. Then it passed through the two people's bodies from head to toe, as if scanning, cleaning, and sweeping. Soon, George and Fred looked at each other, with awkward smiles on their faces. They found that the vomiting effect of the quick-acting skipping candy had completely disappeared. Silently looking at Professor Lockhart with a serious face, the two of them were very tacitly in sync, and smiled silly at the same time, thanking in unison. "Thank you, Professor Lockhart. Our stomachs are no longer uncomfortable, and we can go back to class." As they said that, the two turned around and wanted to return to their seats. The Weir Light Winds, who were relieved, had just walked a few steps. Suddenly, Lockhart's voice came to their ears. "Gryffindor will be deducted 20 points. George, Fred, each of you will submit a paper to me in 3 days. The theme is on the importance of class, or how to avoid skipping class. You two can choose one at will. You cannot repeat it. The length must be 8 inches. As soon as Lockhart's voice fell, the two of them hung their heads and returned to their seats dejectedly. The surrounding little wizards looked at the dejected Weir Light Winds and laughed out loud. They knew the reason for the vomiting of the two people quite well, and they were even the buyers. This made the two people's bad mood immediately worse. When the two heard Lockhart's words, they didn't know that all their tricks had been seen through. It seems that the little wizards are all liars. Professor Lockhart is not gentle at all. 8 inches. How long do you have to write it? Lockhart, who was standing on the podium, saw George and Fred, who were dejected, and felt a little funny in his heart. He hadn't planned to kill a chicken to scare the monkeys, but a chicken ran in front of him. If he didn't kill it, he would feel sorry for the twins' efforts. You know, he really liked killing chickens in his previous life. Because every time he killed a chicken, the progress of his research project would grow by leaps and bounds during that period of time. He finally got used to it. Every once in a while, he would look for chickens and kill one to warn the graduate students under him. The effect was quite good. Cough. Cough. With Lockhart's light cough, the laughter of the little wizards in the classroom suddenly stopped. Lockhart nodded with satisfaction at the scene in front of him. It seems that the killing of a chicken to scare the monkeys just now was quite effective. Feeling the gaze of the little wizards, Lockhart began to speak seriously. "I'm Gilderoy Lockhart, your defense against the dark arts professor. In my class, you will learn about the dangers of real dark magic, and you will also realize the preciousness of life. Through the training of the course, when you face the unknown, you will have the ability to identify danger. When danger comes, you will have a certain ability to protect yourself. When your family is threatened, you will have the ability to protect your family, of course." At this point, Lockhart looked at the serious expressions of the little wizards and chuckled. "All the premises that you listen carefully to the class and complete the homework I assign to you. Okay, let's start calling the roll." Then, Lockhart picked up the roll call book and started calling the roll with a faint smile on his face, accompanied by the sound of "hear" one after another. A large number of little wizards' names were called. This time Lockhart did not let them introduce themselves, but quickly understand their faces and know who the person corresponding to the name is. Because people can slowly understand later, what we have to do today cannot be delayed. In the new book period, the follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top so that you can see the latest chapters. Chapter 37, Little Wizards Asking for Snacks. After calling the roll, Lockhart stood on the podium. The little wizards below looked at Professor Lockhart without any action, and the last ray of hope in their eyes was extinguished. They thought that after the roll call, maybe Professor Lockhart would show them a special effects movie. Seeing the disappointed expression of the little wizard, Lockhart smiled faintly on his face and said to everyone in a brisk tone, "Okay, I know what you are thinking. Actually, I didn't prepare to show it to you, but if you meet my requirements, I can show it to you once." Hearing this, all the little wizards' eyes lit up immediately, and they all looked at Lockhart on the podium. Seeing everyone's full spirits, Lockhart raised the test paper in his hand and said, "Before that, you need to take a test." As soon as Lockhart finished speaking, the smiles on the faces of almost all the little wizards disappeared. The muscles on the faces of the little wizards sitting in the front seemed to be frozen, while George and Fred, who were sitting in the back, lowered their heads and kept muttering in a low voice. I knew that Professor Lockhart's coming was not a good thing. I knew it. Lockhart noticed everyone's expressions, smiled, waved his wand lightly, controlled each test paper in his hand, and floated it in front of each little wizard. After they picked it up and placed it on their desks, Lockhart smiled and said to everyone, "I know that it is indeed a bit inappropriate to have an exam in the first class of the Defense Against the Dark Arts course. But there is no way. I heard from the principal before that your foundation is a little weak, and I need to make up for it." Well, he took the opportunity to pass the buck. He was quite skilled in passing the buck. Even if the principal knew about it, he would just laugh it off. "So, let me see your level through the test, and then I will make a targeted study plan for you." Hearing what Lockhart said, all the little wizards were even more dejected, as if it was the principal's order, and there was nothing they could do. But, as he spoke, Lockhart's tone changed, and he spoke with a hint of temptation. "This exam is not in vain. If you do well, there will be a reward." Hearing Lockhart's tempting tone, all the little wizards raised their heads instantly, their eyes shining, and began to ask loudly, "Professor Lockhart, what is the reward? Is it a snack?" "Yes, Professor, is it? I also like to eat dragon milk cheese." "Well, it's confirmed. He is definitely a foodie." "Professor, it's not the college points, right?" "Professor, I want to ask, if the grades are good, can I not write a paper?" TSK. It was George and Fred who said that. "Professor, I actually like chocolate frogs and moonlight milk candies. Can these be used as rewards?" "I like them too, and strange beans are also okay." Hearing the little wizards chirping and asking for snacks, Lockhart's face was full of black lines. "Good guy, it seems that the news of giving dragon milk cheese to Alice the Little Witch this morning has spread." Shh. Lockhart put his finger between his lips and made a SHHH sound, signaling everyone to keep quiet. Soon, the little wizards quieted down. Lockhart raised a test paper in his hand and said gently, "Don't worry, if you do well in the exam, there will be a school branch, snacks, and I even prepared a magic amulet to reward excellent little wizards." Hearing the rewards mentioned by Lockhart, all the little wizards cheered in surprise. Then, Lockhart added slowly, "Of course, the papers that should be written still need to be written." After hearing this, George and Fred did not get depressed, but were very excited. Isn't it just being punished to write a paper? They have written it many times, but this time it is a little longer. The reward is the most important thing, and they must take the exam seriously this time. The magic amulet. They heard Ron say that Professor Lockhart gave Harry a copy, and they were a little envious at the time. This time there is a chance, and they must seize it. While thinking, George and Fred looked at each other and laughed, as if hinting at something. Lockhart looked at the little wizards below, and began to introduce the rules of the exam. The exam will take 1 hour, and the results will be determined by owls. Students who get the highest level O, excellent, will receive magic amulet made by me, and will also add 20 points to their own school. Then, Lockhart added, "Of course, if you want snacks, you can also. Since I heard that your foundation is weak before, if you reach the level of E, but I can personally pay for you to buy a snack as a reward." Hearing what Lockhart said, all the little wizards cheered. Few people can reach the level of O, excellent, but they can all touch the level of E, good. Students who get A, pass, and above, I suggest you study harder and listen carefully. As for P, poor, D, very poor, and T, extremely poor, which symbolize unsatisfactory grades, Lockhart doesn't need to say much, they also know the results. The content of this test paper is derived from the textbooks you studied before, and their sources will be pointed out after the test. As he said, Lockhart waved his wand lightly. Bang! Almost at the same time, a group of colorful fireworks appeared in the air and exploded with a small bang, symbolizing the formal examination. Let's start. The timer starts now. With Lockhart's order, the little wizards below immediately devoted themselves to the great cause of doing the test paper seriously. Lockhart looked at the familiar scene below, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Everything he said just now was true, but it was not that Lockhart thought highly of these little wizards. It was the reality that these little wizards performed too poorly in the previous defense against the dark arts class. He had specially collected information before. Needless to say, Mr. Quirrell last year was not paying attention to the class at all. He was paying attention to playing the game of hide and seek with Dumbledore. What can these little wizards learn? The professor of the defense against the dark arts class the year before last was a vampire. According to him, this professor drooled at those little wizards. TSK. I really don't know what Dumbledore was thinking. Was he going to keep finding some weird professors to sacrifice to the defense against the dark arts class to offset the curse? Fortunately, there was no teaching accident, otherwise Dumbledore might not feel good. Despite this, the little wizards that year were a little scared in their hearts, hiding far away every day, not to mention attending classes. As for the year before last, a normal wizard came to class, but unfortunately, his teaching level was average, and he left after staying for a year. With a change of 1 year, these little wizards have no energy to learn this course. In fact, although Hogwarts defense against the dark arts and history of magic classes are taught by teachers, in reality, most of the little wizards with excellent grades are self-taught. The history of magic classes, because Professor Binns's lectures are too boring, and the defense against the dark arts classes, because the teacher changes every year, which cannot guarantee the normal teaching quality. In addition to the change of professors, sometimes the textbooks are also changed. For example, Lockhart came this time and asked to replace the textbooks with his 7 books. All of a sudden, the learning content and learning direction changed again. Think about it, how can an ordinary little wizard bear it? The test paper for Lockhart's exam was not difficult. His main purpose was to screen out who has studied seriously in the past few years, so that he can focus on training them. After all, under such conditions, the results are still good, which shows that he has strong self-study ability, and is not the kind of little wizard who can only learn by relying on teachers. Lockhart likes people with strong self-study ability, because it saves him a lot of trouble, especially those with excellent grades. Lockhart's future club will open the door for him. In the new book period, follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top for easy access to the latest chapters. Chapter 38 Discussion. What should I do if I get caught cheating by the teacher? Time passed minute by minute. Lockhart sat on the podium, took out a magic book, and poured himself a glass of water. He drank water and read at the same time. Occasionally, he looked at the students who were writing papers below. He looked like an old invigilator. In his previous life, Lockhart had done a lot of invigilation work, and he was quite familiar with this set of procedures. He knew exactly when to be lazy and when to look up. The only difference was that in his previous life, being lazy meant playing with his phone, but now he was reading. Soon, a quarter of an hour passed. Lockhart, who was reading a book, quietly heard that the rustling sound of writing just now began to intermittently. What does this mean? Lockhart, who has rich experience in invigilation, naturally knows. He looked up at the students below and saw that some people had obvious anxiety on their faces, and even beads of sweat could be clearly seen on their foreheads. Lockhart shook his head slightly. It's over. It seems that he still overestimated this group of students. Although the questions he asked were not particularly simple, they were not difficult. They were all written word by word in the textbook. At most, he changed a few paragraphs, said some small traps, and even left some of them unshaded. According to his estimation, no matter how poor the level is, it will take at least half an hour for them to finish. It was only 15 minutes, and only 1/4 of the exam time had passed. After a while, there was only half an hour left before the end. Lockhart stood up and walked slowly towards the aisle between the desks below. While walking, he observed the students on both sides answering questions. Lockhart took only 2 or 3 steps and saw the students of Slytherin College on the left and Gryffindor on the right. Their quills stayed on the test paper, motionless, their brows furrowed, and their faces flushed slightly. Seeing him walk to the side, they subconsciously pulled the test paper and tried to reach out to cover the places where they couldn't write the answers. Lockhart took a look and said nothing and continued to walk slowly to the back. Sure enough, most students only wrote more than one page of the 4 pages. He set questions from easy to difficult. The first page of the test paper was very simple, and some of them could even be chosen based on common sense. The second page is a little more difficult, but if you study hard, you should be able to answer it easily. The third page is more of a test for students who are talented and study hard. The fourth page has only 3 questions, which he specially found. If any student can answer them, then the Lockhart Club welcomes you. But just now, after a quick glance, I found that most of the students started to get anxious on the second page. Some even didn't finish the first page. Lockhart shook his head slightly. It seems that this group of students really need to make up for it in the future. Lockhart continued to walk back to the back of the classroom, turned a corner, and walked to another aisle. He still slowly watched the students around him writing the test papers. Although most students were anxious and hesitant on the second page of the test paper, there were also some students who wrote furiously on the third page. Lockhart even saw a student thinking about the first big question on the fourth page. He couldn't help but nod slightly. He remembered the name of this student, David McMillan, a little wizard from Slytherin College. Suddenly, Lockhart stopped and looked down at the weird light winds in front of him, his mouth twitching slightly. Are these two funny guys deliberately making trouble for him? Just now they tried to skip class, but now they are openly cheating on his exam. Lockhart sensed it slightly, and found that the feather pens in the hands of the weird light winds exuded a magical power. The nature of this magic is a bit similar to the levitation spell. How could he not know that this is Harry Potter's world famous cheating item for exams, the automatic answering feather pen! Exclamation mark. It seems that the experience of the previous life still has a profound impact on him. If the professor of Hogwarts holds an exam, the first thing he will do is to consider confiscating these cheating tools for the exam. But he has no such awareness at all. After handing out the papers, he invigilates according to his previous experience in invigilation. Empiricism is really killing people. Thinking about it, Lockhart looked at George and Fred, who kept their heads down, as if they were answering the questions very seriously. Then automatic answering feather pen flies over. With a flying spell, the feather pens in the hands of the two flew into Lockhart's hands. George and Fred looked up awkwardly, looking at Professor Lockhart, who had a serious face in front of them. He looked reserved and guilty. Discussion: what if you are caught cheating on the spot by the teacher? Then, a voice came from their ears: the size of your papers will be doubled, and you will also come to my office on Thursday at noon. Then they watched Lockhart take out his wand and point it at the 2 test papers. Under the gaze of the twins, the original answers disappeared. They heard Lockhart's indifferent voice again: write it again. If I find it again, the size of the paper will be doubled again. Suddenly, the two looked at the blank test paper in front of them with sad faces. It's over. The original 8 inches was quite long, but now it has become 16 inches. It's terrible. After Lockhart finished speaking, he continued to move forward. He had to observe carefully. Who dares to commit crimes against the wind? This time he didn't realize it. If he paid a little attention later, he would have no chance to escape. After walking through the entire classroom, Lockhart nodded with satisfaction. On the first day of school, there were indeed not many people who dared to cheat on the spot, only the weird light winds. Immediately, they returned to their seats and waited for the end of the exam. Time passed slowly, and soon, it was time for the exam to end. Bang! Lockhart waved his wand lightly, and a group of colorful fireworks appeared in the air again, and exploded with a small bang, symbolizing the end of the exam. Okay, everyone stop writing. Lockhart's voice spread throughout the classroom, and most of the students who had been anxious before suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, they didn't have to think about it anymore, and they really couldn't think of the answer. But a trace of worry still flashed across their faces, as if they knew that their grades would probably be bad. Others, like George and Fred, were nervous and were writing furiously on the test paper. Even if Lockhart called for a stop, they didn't put down their quills. Only a few students were calm, as if they knew that their grades would not be too bad. Seeing this scene, Lockhart waved his wand lightly. In an instant, the quills of the students who were writing furiously suddenly became uncontrollable and floated in the air. Then, the test papers in front of each student also floated in the air and then floated towards the podium. As Lockhart gently slid his wand from the air to the podium, all the students' test papers were stacked and neatly placed on the podium. In the new book period, the follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top so that they can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 39, Lockhart's Way of Training the Young Wizard. Seeing the thick stack of test papers on the podium, the students below were basically silent. The classroom was very quiet, as if a silent spell had been cast. Seeing this, Lockhart did not speak, but sat down to mark the test papers. At the same time, the students below began to communicate in a low voice. "How did you do? What do you think? I was confident at the beginning, but I couldn't write on the second page. What about you? Just like you, many questions seemed to have been seen before, but I didn't know how to answer them. Ah, it's over, it's over, my snacks are gone. It's good that I won't be criticized by the professor this time. It's so miserable, many questions look familiar, but I can't do them, it's over." On the podium, Lockhart was marking the test papers quickly. With rich experience in marking papers, he knew which questions were right and which were wrong with a simple glance. There was no need to write by hand, just point the wand, and the correct and wrong marks will automatically appear on the test paper. In addition, most students basically only finished the first page, and could not do much on the second page. The difficulty of marking the papers was greatly reduced. As time passed, the thick stack of papers, to be marked slowly shrank at a speed visible to the naked eye. Instead, there were 3 stacks of papers of different thicknesses. The thickest stack on the right basically failed. The thin stack in the middle had acceptable or good grades. There were only a few papers on the left, and these were all excellent. It didn't take much time for Lockhart to re-record everyone's grades, then waved his wand, controlled each paper, and floated it in front of each student. After all the students received their papers, most of them looked better, and their grades were imaginable. Seeing everyone's expressions, Lockhart stood up and said with some anguish, "Have you all seen your results? I believe no one wants me to read out the results. My evaluation of this test is only one word, poor. Only 4 people got A, pass, 2 people got E, good, 1 person got O, excellent, and the remaining 42 people all failed. What does this mean? Your foundation is too weak. Fortunately, you will not participate in OWLs until next year, and there is still time to make up for it. Otherwise, according to the regulations of previous years, such results would not be able to enter the advanced class at all, let alone think about obtaining the NEWS certificate." Hearing Lockhart's reprimand, most of the students lowered their heads silently, looking at the red P, poor, on their test papers with some shame. In response, Lockhart nodded with satisfaction. As the saying goes, knowing shame makes one braver. Knowing shame is a good thing. Only in this way can one have motivation and strive to make progress. The most troublesome are those who have given up, and this is what Lockhart finds the most difficult to accept. Fortunately, there was no such person among his students this time. Then Lockhart reached out and took out a magic amulet and said to everyone, "Okay, now that the results are out, I will also honor the rewards I received before. Now, let's have David McMillan, the only wizard from Slytherin College who has achieved an O, excellent, grade, come up to receive his reward." David McMillan, who had always been straight-backed, head held high, and full of confidence, smiled when he heard Lockhart call his name. He had just been doing the test paper seriously, racking his brains, and finally won the first place. So he trotted all the way to the podium, and Lockhart handed the magic amulet in his hand to the student in front of him, and then looked at the students below, and introduced them loudly. "This is a magic amulet I specially made. It has a warning effect. If you encounter danger or black magic, it will remind you to stay away from danger. If you don't have time to escape, it will automatically create a layer of armor to resist the attack." Hearing Professor Lockhart's introduction, David excitedly picked up the magic amulet in his hand, then raised it high above his head, waving it at the students below as if showing off. The students below showed envy after seeing it. Seeing this, Lockhart nodded slightly. The heartache just now suppressed their originally impetuous mentality. Now, it's time to stimulate them to study hard. After David returned to his seat with the amulet, Lockhart continued to say to the students below, as for the 2 students who got E, but, you can tell me now what snacks you want. I'll let an owl send it to you, when the time comes. After hearing Lockhart's promise, the 2 students below were excited, stretched their hands high, and shouted at the same time. I want dragon milk cheese. I want cauldron cake. Hearing the 2 students' shouts, the other students who did not get any rewards all looked at them with envy. Seeing this, Lockhart also had a faint smile on his face. He knew that the opportunity had appeared, and it was time to give them a strong dose of medicine. This strong dose of medicine should be able to deal with them properly. Cough. Cough. With a light cough, all the students below immediately looked at Lockhart. Seeing this, Lockhart said in a deep voice, such tests will be held once a month in the future. Those who rank at the top will receive various rewards. As he said this, Lockhart took out his wand and waved his hand. More than a dozen magic items floated out of the space bag, including amulets, hats, shoes, crystal balls, etc. They were neatly arranged in front of many students. Then they heard Lockhart's tempting voice ringing in their ears. These various magic items, including the snacks you want, can be obtained as long as you have excellent grades in the monthly exams. And if you make significant progress, you can also get my reward. I will list the specific rules in detail later, so that everyone can see them. As long as you work hard, everything is possible. In an instant, all the students in the classroom were excited and cheered, and the classroom was boiling. They had never received rewards for exams before. This time, Professor Lockhart was willing to provide reward items, and such a rare thing as magic items. Who wouldn't like it? The most important thing is, this is not just once, but once a month. If you don't get it once, you can continue to work hard next month and there is still hope. Lockhart looked at the boiling classroom with a faint smile on his face. All his actions in this class can be described in one word. Suppress first and then promote. First, through a test paper, the mentality of this group of students was completely corrected. He knew very well that the professors of the previous defense against the dark arts classes were either very average or problematic. The whole class was very impetuous. Otherwise, the foundation would not be so poor. After completely correcting their impetuous mentality, let them correct their learning attitude. It's time to stimulate them to study seriously. As for stimulation, according to his experience, chicken soup is the worst effect, and it often doesn't last for a few days. The best way is to reward them with real money. In his previous life, he liked to throw money at them. When his graduate students saw the large cash rewards, he had to praise their hard work. But now, he can't just throw gold galleons at them. On the one hand, the graduate students in his previous life were all adults, so there was no problem with tempting them with money. But now, these students are only 14 or 15 years old. If you tempt them with money, let alone whether it violates their moral conscience. Lockhart was a little afraid that Dumbledore would call him to the office and scold him. And there is naturally no problem with taking interesting magic items. On the other hand, it is naturally for the purpose of spreading runes. The magic items he took out were all made by himself by studying runes. These magic items are all related to runes. If they want to study them, they will only cultivate their interest in runes. As long as he gives a little guidance later, it will be very helpful to promote the new magic system in the later period. Well, it is definitely not, because these magic items are cheap to refine and affordable. In the new book period, the follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that you can see the latest chapters. Chapter 40, A Wizarding Sanctuary, Hogwarts Library, Hogwarts, Defense Against the Dark Arts Classroom. Ring, ring, ring. With the ringing of a bell, the 4th grade Defense Against the Dark Arts class in the afternoon officially ended. A large number of young wizards walked out of the classroom door with brisk steps, smiling on their faces, and walked towards the lounge of their respective colleges. There were very few students staying in the classroom. Only a few young wizards gathered on the podium to ask Professor Lockhart to answer some of their doubts. Professor, why doesn't wearing protective earmuffs work when encountering an evil bird? The reason is very simple. His high-pitched scream will make people crazy and extremely penetrating. Ordinary protective earmuffs can't resist it at all. The best way is to cast a silencing spell to deal with it. Professor, how should we deal with it when we encounter a beehive? With your current level, you can't deal with it effectively. The simplest way is to cast a breathing spell to hide your breath, and then jump into the water. This is the best way to deal with it. Professor, please, you should. As Lockhart patiently answered every question of the young wizards, soon, these young wizards left with satisfaction. Looking at the empty classroom, Lockhart felt very comfortable. It has been a long time since he had such a good time teaching. The last class was for first year wizards. The main thing was to listen to their self-introductions, encourage them, and enhance their interest in magic. There was really no room for him to perform. This class was for fourth year wizards. Although they spent a lot of time doing the test papers in the beginning, they explained every question they asked in the end. Lockhart felt very happy when he was allowed to perform. He estimated that he had not taught in the classroom for nearly half a year. It was not that he liked teaching students very much, but it was purely a professional habit. In his previous life, even if he had research projects under him, he had at least 4 classes a week. This state lasted for about 6 or 7 years, which made him develop the habit of regular classes. This time, I have not stood on the podium for nearly 5 consecutive months, and have not taught the students below. To be honest, I'm still vaguely not used to it. This time, teaching can be regarded as venting some of the accumulated discomfort before. Naturally, I will feel very comfortable in my heart. It was like eating an ice cream in the hot summer. In one word, it was refreshing. Then, Lockhart walked out of the classroom and headed for his office. He had to pack up. Today, both classes were over, and he could control the rest of the time freely. He was going to a place he had been thinking about day and night, the Hogwarts Library. Life should have a sense of ritual. In his previous life, Lockhart paid great attention to the quality of life. He liked to adjust his state through some small rituals. For example, before eating, he would close his eyes and meditate for 30 seconds. Before doing something, he was used to printing his plan on a page and placing it in the most conspicuous position in front of him. It reminded him all the time what to do next. This time, when he entered the Hogwarts library, he decided that he must wash himself well and even change into a new set of clothes. This was his devotion to knowledge. At the same time, it was also his respect for the Hogwarts library. The status of the Hogwarts library in the wizarding world is like the status of the British Library in the world in his previous life. World famous. The best in the world. Hogwarts is a holy place for all wizards. The heritage and rich collection behind it can be called a repository of wizard civilization information. Since the establishment of Hogwarts for more than 1,600 years, every headmaster has continuously enriched the collection of books in the library. There was even a period of time when the headmaster at that time did not let go of the collection of pureblood families. He went directly to the door and copied the other party's collection through certain means. Lockhart has seen these in Hogwarts, a school history. Of course, it was not said directly, but through hints, but Lockhart also understood. Otherwise, why would the book mention? After a cordial and friendly exchange, the sacred pureblood family agreed with Hogwarts' concept of cultivating better wizards and voluntarily let Headmaster Baron copy the collection at home. TSK. Look, this is what a Hogwarts headmaster should have. So, to put it bluntly, the Hogwarts library basically collects precious books that were born in these 1,600 years. In Lockhart's eyes, it is simply a treasure that is difficult to describe in words. When he walked into the library with a pious heart, he felt a peaceful atmosphere inside and heard the rustling sound of pages turning. He felt peaceful in his heart, especially when he saw a large number of books emitting magical fluctuations neatly placed inside a large number of bookshelves. The heat in his eyes was replaced by reason, because reading a book is not just about picking up a book and reading it. When you enter the library, you can't just find a seat and pick up a book to read. This is not called reading. It's called wasting time. Everything must be done in a method and with a clear purpose. At this moment, Lockhart looked at Miss Pince, the Hogwarts librarian, who was sitting at a table not far away. He walked directly towards her. Although Lockhart deliberately controlled his steps, he didn't want his footsteps to affect others, and he didn't want to defile this sacred library in his mind. But Miss Pince, who had a keen hearing, still raised her head. "Professor Lockhart, what book do you need to find?" Miss Pince, who was tall and beautiful in dark green wizard robes, asked curiously. She was quite curious about the newly appointed Professor of Defense against the Dark Arts. He came to the library on the first day of class, which was enough to show his love for knowledge. This made Miss Pince, who loved reading, full of favor for Lockhart, not to mention his handsome face, especially since he was from Ravenclaw, the symbol of wisdom. She was also a witch from Ravenclaw, but she had been working as a librarian in Hogwarts. "Miss Pince, you should have been working as a librarian in the library for many years. I would like to ask if there is a list of books in the library, or if you have compiled a list of books in the library. I want to know the distribution of books in the entire library." Hearing Lockhart's request, Miss Pince was stunned. It was the first time she heard someone ask for a list of all the books. Most professors would either ask her directly where the books were, or ask her if she had any books to recommend, and at most ask her to make a list of recommendations. No one had ever directly asked for a list of books in the entire library. It's not that you can't ask for it, it's just that it doesn't make much sense. After all, there are too many books. If you need a book, just ask her directly. She is very familiar with the location of every book in the library. Seeing that Madame Pince was stunned, Lockhart repeated his request again, with a hint of affirmation in his tone. "Miss Pince, do you have a list of all the books in the library?" Hearing Lockhart's question again, Madame Pince came back to her senses, looked at Lockhart in front of her, and asked somewhat uncontrollably, "Professor Lockhart, do you know how many books there are in the Hogwarts library?" In the new book period, the follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that they can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 41 Lockhart's Reading Method. Lockhart's Office. Lockhart sat at the desk in his office, slowly flipping through the thick list of Hogwarts books on the desk. He was very excited, and had a bright smile on his face. Although Miss Pince didn't quite understand Lockhart's request, she still took out a list of books she had carefully compiled in the face of a very reasonable request from a professor. This is the basic quality of a professional librarian. Well, it was definitely not because of Lockhart's handsome appearance, but purely because he was moved by his enthusiasm for knowledge. After Lockhart got the list, he thanked him, and went back to his office to study slowly. As a university professor, he read a lot of books. He knew very well that entering a library, finding a place to sit down, and randomly finding a seemingly high-end book to read, such behavior is inefficient. In his eyes, it even felt like a waste of time. When he reads a book, he first looks at the author. What kind of research results has the author had? What great things has he done? If so, it means that, as long as the other party writes this book seriously, at least the quality and quantity are guaranteed. Secondly, it is to look at the catalogue of the book. The quality of a book can be judged to a large extent by the catalogue of the book. Through the catalogue, you can quickly understand what the book is about. What does it involve? Even the essence of a book can be judged by the catalogue. If the Hogwarts library is compared to a book, then the author of this book does not need to be paid attention to. It is absolutely the best in the world. Who in the world can have more books collected, students taught, and strong people than Hogwarts? Therefore, for Lockhart, he needs to understand the catalogue of the book of the Hogwarts library, that is, the list of all the books in Hogwarts. Through the list, he can quickly understand the books in the entire Hogwarts library. More importantly, he can completely understand the changes in the wizarding world in the past 1,600 years through this list. Whether it is spells, potions, alchemy, etc., the development of wizard civilization over the years can be judged by the titles of these books. Because the title of the book is a core introduction to the whole book. For example, Lockhart just saw a book written in 1340, Subverting the Concept of Potion, The Importance of Wizard Will, written by the famous potion master Susanna Ginner. Just looking at the title of this book, you can know that in the 14th century, wizard civilization may have a breakthrough in the field of potions. Look at the potion books before 1340, on 18 methods of refining potions, detailed explanation of 72 potions, grasping the timing of refining potions, etc. It will soon become clear that before the 14th century, the refining of potions was probably limited to methods, medicinal materials, etc. There is not much attention paid to the emotions and will of wizards. At present, the importance of emotions and will to wizards, even if Lockhart is a potion novice, understands its importance. This is the change of the times and the development of history. From this list of famous books, Lockhart can fully estimate the development and changes in various fields of the entire wizard civilization, and even can simply infer the future development trend. This is the difference between a specialized scholar and an ordinary person reading a book. It is a complete iteration of concepts and a dimensionality reduction of cognition. If an ordinary wizard had seen so many books, he would have been dazzled long ago. He would probably be immersed in the ocean of knowledge and unable to extricate himself. In the end, even if he walked out of the entire Hogwarts library, he would probably have gained very little. After all, there are too many books and too much knowledge. The world knows infinite things, but only knows the differences and similarities. Hogwarts, the principal's office. Dumbledore, wearing half-moon lenses, sat on his huge desk and listened silently to Professor McGonagall, who was wearing a dark green wizard robe opposite him, reporting on the start of school. Gryffindor College has dropped its scores again, and the reason is still the Weir Light Winds. Professor McGonagall complained, and then continued to report. Principal, the school has just started for 3 days, and the school's food fund reserves currently have a total of 146 gold galleons. The Ministry of Magic and the school board will allocate 600 gold galleons at the end of the month, which is enough for all the little wizards to consume this year, and a part can be reserved for the cultivation of magical plants. Seeing Dumbledore nodded gently, Professor McGonagall continued to speak. Regarding the teacher's fund, each professor will receive monthly salary of 50 gold galleons, and at the end of the year there will be a benefit worth 100 gold galleons. Professor McGonagall continued expressionlessly. Principal, will the year-end benefit be directly issued in the form of gold galleons, or purchased in the form of corresponding items? Dumbledore thought for a moment and said gently, let's change to gold galleons this year. We issued items last year, but I feel that Snape and his team were not very enthusiastic. Okay, Principal. Professor McGonagall picked up the quill pen next to him and quickly wrote it down and continued to report. Regarding Professor Lockhart, he proposed to the students to have a monthly exam and reward outstanding students during class yesterday. He told me that he would personally prepare the corresponding reward, but Lockhart said that the school is willing to provide a sum of production funds, which would be the best. After hearing this, Dumbledore smiled, nodded silently, and said nothing. Professor McGonagall did not repeat himself, and continued to report on the relevant matters of the start of school. Regarding Lockhart's request, Professor McGonagall said, "What the hell are you thinking? You want the school to provide funds for what you promised yourself, and Hogwarts gold galleons are not blown by the wind. That was donated by the Ministry of Magic and the school board. Besides, you said you wanted to reward outstanding students, so the school certainly welcomes it. But since you said so, don't expect the school to bear this part of the responsibility. Otherwise, if the school is expected to bear the responsibility for whatever the professors say in the future, what will the school lose?" Professor McGonagall, who has always been strict and known as the vice principal of Hogwarts, has an attitude towards school funds. She said she will pay great attention to it and will not let a single gold galleon go to waste. Well, as long as it doesn't cost Hogwarts money, she has always been approving. Then, Professor McGonagall reported to Dumbledore one by one about the relevant matters and problems of the opening of the school. Basically, she came up with her own solutions to most of the problems, and Dumbledore did not veto them, but nodded silently to agree. Professor McGonagall is very accustomed to Dumbledore's attitude because this has been the process for all these years. Basically, all the big and small things in Hogwarts have to go through her hands, and when there are problems, she will report them to Dumbledore for the final decision. Dumbledore trusted Professor McGonagall very much, and he basically did not interfere in the affairs of Hogwarts. But Professor McGonagall still showed respect for the headmaster, and would report to Headmaster Dumbledore at the beginning of each month. Suddenly, Dumbledore heard Professor McGonagall say, "Mrs. Pince said that Professor Lockhart asked him for a list of library books yesterday. She thinks that the list of books can be made into a magic item, which can automatically tell the corresponding location of the books according to the professor's needs, which can reduce her work pressure. So she wants to apply to the school to refine magic items. I personally suggest that you can try it. It is a bit difficult for Mrs. Pince to manage the school library alone." After hearing this, Dumbledore did not move, and kept squinting his eyes to think. Professor McGonagall was a little surprised. Such a thing should be worth doing. It will only benefit the school, and not harm it. Then I heard the first question Dumbledore asked today. "You just said that Professor Lockhart asked Madam Pince for a catalogue of the library's books, right? In the new book period, follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that they can easily see the latest chapters. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42, Violation of the Law of Historical Development. Sorry, the timing is wrong. You just said that Professor Lockhart asked Madam Pince for a list of library books, right? Facing Dumbledore's question, Professor McGonagall nodded and asked curiously, "What's wrong, Headmaster? Do you have any questions?" "No problem, go on, Minerva." In response to Professor McGonagall's curiosity, Headmaster Dumbledore smiled gently and motioned to continue reporting. During the next reporting time, Professor McGonagall clearly felt that Dumbledore was a little absent-minded, but due to Dumbledore's previous refusal, he did not show any expression. He just suppressed the idea deeply in his heart, and at the same time, he paid more attention to Lockhart. However, what Professor McGonagall did not notice was that the portrait of the headmaster next to him opened his eyes, as if he had noticed Dumbledore's question just now. Maybe there was not much to do at the beginning of the school, so Professor McGonagall finished her report quickly. After rejecting Dumbledore's invitation for a glass of honey, Professor McGonagall stepped out of the headmaster's office. Boom. With the rumble of the stone statue, the door closed. The portrait of Headmaster Armando Dupont next to him spoke. "Dumbledore, Gilderoy Lockhart wants a list of all the books in the library. This is something worth noting. Don't worry that he is looking for a lost magic book. What I'm afraid of is that he is purely for this list. You know who the last person who did this was?" Although he was looking at the Durmstrang library, Dumbledore heard what Headmaster Armando Dupont said, but did not reply and remained silent. He just took out a thick book with a dark blue cover, a lot of patterns, and a bronze book frame on the edge. He subconsciously stroked the lower right corner of the book, and his eyes revealed a trace of nostalgia. Where he stroked, that is, the lower right corner of the book, there was a dark red handwriting similar to a signature. "To my dear friend Albus Dumbledore." The cover of the book reads, "A brief discussion on the development of the wizarding world," written by Gellert Grindelwald. At this moment, Lockhart was constantly reading the list of books he got from Madam Pince in his office. At the same time, next to the books, there was a grey notebook, which recorded his thoughts from reading the list of books. 1. Wizards before the Common Era rarely used wands. They seemed to be very easy to cast spells. Many advanced spells were created before the Common Era too. The Patronus charm has been passed down since ancient times, and has great potential for exploration. It is recommended that you must master it if you have the opportunity in the future. 3. The wizarding world may have suffered a disaster in the 3rd century AD, because there were almost no works produced during that period. 56. It seems that the further back in time goes, the closer to modern times, the lower the frequency of magic works produced. This does not conform to the law of historical development. According to common sense, the closer to modern times, the more advanced magic should be, and the higher the frequency of magic works should be. 87. The closer to modern times, the new spells tend to attack individuals, and they seem to be closely related to emotions and will. Lockhart exhaled lightly, slowly closed the list of books obtained from Madame Pince, then picked up his grey notebook and slowly reviewed the 87 ideas he had sorted out. As he reviewed, the sense of disharmony in his heart became stronger. He found that there were problems in the wizarding world, and there were big problems. He carefully arranged the list of books he had just read in terms of time, and interpreted them from the perspective of the development of the times. As a result, he suddenly discovered something that violated the law of historical development. According to common sense, the accumulation of knowledge is gradual at first, and then it will develop explosively, and then return to the cycle of gradual explosive gradual. For example, in the East in the previous life, knowledge was slowly accumulated for hundreds of years, and then suddenly exploded in the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period. After the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period, the accumulation of knowledge began to be gradual again. The same is true for the Renaissance in the West. There was an accumulation in the previous period, and then suddenly there was an explosive period. Then it entered the stage of gradual accumulation. Moreover, the closer to modern times, the shorter the interval between this gradual and explosive cycle will be. For example, in Lockhart's previous life, it might take hundreds of years to experience an explosive cycle at first, but in modern times, it may only take decades of accumulation, or even more than 10 years of accumulation, to promote an explosion. This is commonly known as the Big Bang of science and technology. The wizarding world is completely different. He seems to have never experienced a cycle from gradual to explosive. In other words, he has always been in a gradual state, that is, the wizarding world has been developing slowly. There has not been a period of rapid growth or a magic explosion. In other words, there seems to be a period of magic explosion before Christ, but the accumulation of knowledge after Christ has become flat. Occasionally, some subversive concepts appear, but they do not promote a new round of magic explosion. For example, the existence of the wand can be said to be a new way for wizards to cast spells. But it seems that it has not played a big role in promoting magic research, but only allows wizards to transform from the previous wandless casting to the current wand casting. At most, some books on wand casting were added during that period, but there were not many others. All this puzzled Lockhart, but he was not prepared to delve into it. He was not a person who was obsessed with trivial matters. Otherwise, he had so many research projects in his previous life, and no matter how many brain cells he had, he could not hold on. Put this question deep in his heart, and then start preparing for class. In the afternoon, he still has a second-year wizard defense against the dark arts class to attend. Well, he will meet the 3 little Gryffindors in this class. In the afternoon, in the defense against the dark arts classroom, the little wizards from Gryffindor and Slytherin quickly found their seats and talked in whispers. This was the first time they had taken the defense against the dark arts class since they were in the 2nd grade. This year, they had a new teacher, Professor Lockhart. They were looking forward to Professor Lockhart. They had heard from the little wizards in the 1st grade that Professor Lockhart would show a shocking special effects movie. Although the seniors in the 4th grade complained that Professor Lockhart asked them to do the test papers, they talked about the rewards given by the professor with great relish. Not only snacks, but also magic items. All of this always made them look forward to it. Well, it would be better to give them rewards and show them special effects movies. If there were new surprises, that would be even better. At this time, Harry, Hermione and Ron next to him gathered together to discuss in a low voice. Hermione, I heard that you saw Professor Lockhart on the Hogwarts Express before. How did you feel about him? Professor Lockhart is a very nice person, very handsome, and very patient in answering questions. Harry, can you lend me your magic amulet? It was given to you by Professor Lockhart. Okay, Ron, but you have to be careful not to break it. Don't worry, Harry. Draco Malfoy, who was not far away, saw Harry and others whispering, snorted coldly, and turned his head to discuss with his 2 little followers. Although Lockhart seemed to have had a little conflict with his father Lucius, this did not affect his expectations for Professor Lockhart's reward. He also wanted to have his own magic amulet like Harry Potter. Well, no matter what, he couldn't lose to Harry. As the bell rang, they saw Professor Lockhart carrying a suitcase and walking towards the podium. In the new book period, follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top for easy access to the latest chapters. Chapter 43, Practicing Spells. Lockhart walked to the podium, carrying a suitcase. Looking at the two distinct groups of young wizards below, he couldn't help but sigh. Only 2 days after the start of school, and only 3 classes, he found that the schools were very exclusive. Basically, each school sat in a group, and the frequency of communication between each other was very low. Especially the Slytherin school, they were very exclusive of other schools. The next was Ravenclaw. The last Gryffindor was better. As for Hufflepuff, Lockhart had not officially taught them yet, but he guessed that at best, they were better than Gryffindor. However, Lockhart didn't want to care about these. These problems had been deeply rooted for decades or even hundreds of years, and he couldn't find a solution for the time being. What's more, he didn't have the mind to solve these problems. This should be what Dumbledore considered. Now, he was focused on the runes. So, looking at the expectant eyes of the young wizards below, Lockhart showed a bright smile and briefly introduced himself. Looking at the textbooks on the desks, he said to the little wizards gently, "Today's class, everyone can put the books back. We have a practical class today, and you only need a wand." Wow. The little wizards below exclaimed, "Practical class, this is their favorite class. No need to read those boring textbooks, just practice interesting magic. Who doesn't like such a class?" Then, the little wizards heard Lockhart's gentle and steady voice. "Now, all the little wizards stand up and stand in the aisle. Let's start today's practical class." As soon as Lockhart's voice fell, all the little wizards stood next to the desks very neatly and walked to the middle, looking forward to the next class. Then Lockhart waved his wand lightly, and all the desks floated in the air and slowly moved to the back of the classroom. Then they were placed together in a very regular manner, leaving a huge open space in the middle of the classroom. Lockhart stood at the front of the open space, waved to the little wizards, and motioned everyone to come forward and gather in a group. Soon, looking at the little wizards in front of him, Lockhart opened his magic suitcase. He took out a large cage covered with cloth from it, waved his wand, and controlled it to float in the air. Looking at the curious eyes of the little wizards looking at the cage, especially Harry, who stretched his head high, his expression was full of expectation. Lockhart suddenly had a bad taste, and whispered in a low voice, "Be sure to pay attention, don't scream after seeing it, because that will anger them." Suddenly, Lockhart's low voice infected the little wizards around him, and everyone held their breath, as if the opposite was something terrifying. Seeing everyone's expressions, Lockhart suddenly lifted the cloth on the cage. Suddenly, a large number of elves with blue bodies, dark eyes, and ugly pointed faces, waving their wings, appeared in the cage. Seeing this, all the little wizards showed disappointment on their faces. Lockhart looked at everyone's disappointed expressions, and said with a smile, "You are only in the second year, and you haven't mastered many spells yet. You can't expect me to catch a werewolf or a dementor to teach you. Besides, this is a Cornish elf. Although he is small, his flying speed is not slow. Especially, they like to grab people's ears and lift them up in the air and hang them on the treetops." Hearing Lockhart's introduction, the little wizard's eyes lit up instantly. After hearing the professor's introduction, the elves seemed very interesting. Seeing that everyone's interest was raised again, Lockhart continued to introduce. "Today's practical class, what you have to do, is to cast a coma spell on the elves. Those who perform well can add points to their own college. The best results can get the magic amulet I made by hand." As soon as these words came out, all the little wizards were immediately excited. "Professor, I'll go first. I'll go first. I said it first." Well, they have seen Harry Potter hanging the magic amulet around his neck recently, and their hearts have been full of envy. Seeing everyone's enthusiastic performance, Lockhart waved his wand and drew a beautiful arc in the air. Soon, a dark blue elf was released from the cage floating in the air. Lockhart said slowly, "Okay, don't be impatient. Before learning, learn about elves first." Under the control of magic, the elf floated in front of everyone. Lockhart held the wand, pointed at the head of the elf in front of him, and introduced, "The elves in Cornwall are also called naughty elves. They like to play pranks very much. Hearing this, Ron seemed to be thinking about something, as if he thought of his two twin brothers. After thinking for a while, he continued to focus on Professor Lockhart's speech. His characteristic is that he flies very fast. Because he is not lethal, he is listed as XX magical creatures. The purpose of today's practical course is to train everyone's speed and accuracy in casting spells. The elves in Cornwall are mostly dark blue and about 8 inches long. Hearing Lockhart's introduction to the elves, the little wizard suddenly became a little bored. Seeing everyone's expressions, Lockhart sped up. Then Lockhart used a sentence to arouse the interest of the little wizards. After we finish practicing the spell, we will start a mysterious activity. Now, everyone line up in 3 rows. Hearing the mysterious activity mentioned by Lockhart, the little wizard's interest was instantly aroused. They lined up in unison and looked at Lockhart with expectant eyes. Lockhart smiled, but still followed his own lesson preparation process and said, "Okay, don't use your wands, just chant the spell with me first." Dizzy. Soon, all the little wizards chanted the spell with Lockhart in unison. Dizzy. Dizzy. Sensing that everyone only had some minor problems with the tone and speed of speech, but it didn't have much impact, Lockhart nodded with satisfaction. Then he repeated it several times and slightly adjusted the way everyone chanted the spell. Basically, there was no problem with the spell. After the preparations were completed, Lockhart said in a deep voice, "Okay, line up now. Everyone is practicing the stunning spell. Once you have practiced the stunning spell well, you can start the mysterious activity. At that time, the magic amulet will be waiting for you." Hearing this, the little wizards picked up their wands and lined up in a neat row. Seeing this, Lockhart looked at the first little wizard, Mickey, who looked a little nervous. He gently comforted him. "Mickey, don't be nervous. I will relax the control of the elf later, and then you can use the stunning spell." Hearing Lockhart's gentle tone, Mickey's inner pressure was reduced a lot, and he nodded heavily and held his wand tightly. He aimed at the dark blue elf floating in the air not far away. Seeing this, Lockhart nodded to Mickey and relaxed the control of the elf. Faint. Looking at the elf flapping its wings and flying to the left, Mickey was smart and quickly waved his wand, aiming at the target and shouted loudly. Instantly, the magic power in Mickey's body was infused into the magic wand, emitting a red light, which hit the fleeing elf. Looking at the elf who fainted on the ground, Mickey showed a joyful smile on his face. The little wizard behind him also showed an eager look. In the new book period, the follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that you can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 44, Stupid and Rich Lockhart. Fainted. Watching the little wizards one after another casting the stunning spell and the increasingly lively atmosphere, Lockhart also showed a smile on his face. Sure enough, the practical class is the most attractive to the little wizards in the class that is most likely to liven up the atmosphere. For the second year little wizards, it is very tempting. However, Lockhart waved his wand helplessly when he saw the elf lying on the ground motionless. Clear spring-like water. A stream of water emerged from the tip of the wand and poured on the elf's face. Soon, the elf woke up and looked at the little wizards not far away and Lockhart, who was close at hand, with a sad face, lying on the ground motionless, playing dead. Seeing this, Lockhart's mouth twitched and he waved his wand to control the elf to float to the corner on the left side of the classroom. There were already 5 similar elves lying there, playing dead. The effect of this practical course is good, but it is a bit wasteful of elves. Of the 15 elves in his cage, 6 have been broken. Judging from the interest of the next group of little wizards, the remaining 9 will not be much better. He curled his lips helplessly, controlled the cage to open, summoned the next active elf, and continued to place it in front of the little wizards. A new round of practice began. Of course, for the elves, it was a new round of torture. As time passed slowly, basically every little wizard had gone through more than 5 rounds. The only exception was Ron. This poor little wizard, his wand was broken. He was originally casting a coma spell on the elf, but ended up knocking himself out. Lockhart was speechless immediately. Then, after waking up Ron, he took out a spare wand for him. This was specially purchased before he went to the Marvel world. He was worried that, if the wand was lost, he would keep a spare one. Despite this, Ron's level was still relatively average. Of course, it might also be related to just getting in touch with a new wand. However, there were many little wizards that made Lockhart's eyes light up. Among them, there were 12 young wizards including Hermione, Harry, Mickey, and Draco. The first time they cast the stunning spell, they successfully knocked out the elf. Especially Harry. Lockhart observed his movements and found that his fighting talent was indeed not weak. Almost every stunning spell was full of magic power and the effect was very obvious. The speed of casting the spell was at least 20% faster than that of the same young wizard. What does such a talent mean? Lockhart knew very well. The future battle master! ! Sure enough, being able to compete with Voldemort naturally has its unique features. How high a degree of recognition can such a talent get? With his thoughts turning, Lockhart put the idea in his heart and continued to start the next round of practice. Soon, 2 more rounds passed. Finally, his 15 Cornish elves were completely played out. He looked at his watch and found that the get out of class would be over in about 15 minutes. So, Lockhart threw the last elf in the corner and clapped his hands. After attracting the attention of all the little wizards, he said, "Okay, today's practice ends here. Next, let's start the mysterious activity I mentioned. Activity rules. I will let the 15 elves just now run away in the classroom. You attack. Whoever hits more times will rank higher. The wizard with the highest ranking can not only add 10 points to his score, but also get a magic amulet made by me. The little wizards ranked 2nd to 3rd can order a snack of their favorite, and I will let the owl deliver it. Even if the little wizards who didn't get the reward this time don't be discouraged. Such activities will be held once a month in the future, and there will be rewards to be won at that time." Hearing the rewards mentioned by Lockhart, all the little wizards' eyes lit up. Sure enough, just like what the seniors in the 4th grade said, Professor Lockhart is generous, and he can get rewards and magic items as long as he reaches out. How could Lockhart not know what they are thinking? While eating this morning, he heard those little wizards whispering about him. He didn't care about this at all. In his previous life, his graduate students also thought he was very generous, or a fat sheep, and some even complained that he was stupid and rich because he gave them real money as rewards, and the amount was not small. Naturally, some people would regard him as a fat sheep. He was not being a rich man, but purely to ensure the quality and progress of the project. According to his experience, the graduate students under him were into completely different states when they spent money and when they didn't. It's better to spend money than to treat him to a meal. With money hanging in front, the progress is very fast. Although he spent a lot of money, he made a lot of money after his project was successful. In his previous life, whether he was stupid or not, he made a lot of money from his research projects. TSK. There is no gain without hard work. He understood this principle early on. Looking at the little wizards who were excited and full of energy, Lockhart smiled and walked to the corner of the classroom. Looking at the 15 Cornish elves lying on the ground pretending to be dead, motionless, Lockhart drew a circle with his right hand slowly, controlling the ring with his mind. Soon, as his right hand moved, a red flame-colored ring of fire appeared. A large number of silk threads automatically spread out from the middle of the ring of fire, connecting with the runes in the middle. Click, click, rune, communication. After activating the power of the rune, Lockhart instantly felt that he could sense the emotions of the creatures around him under the blessing of a gentle energy. He focused his attention on the 15 elves lying on the ground pretending to be dead, and instilled his meaning into their minds through his mind. Soon, Lockhart saw the 15 elves open their eyes, stand up, wave their wings, and look at him with fear in their eyes. Lockhart could feel that these elves were afraid of him, and he was not surprised. After all, he was the one who brought them to the little wizard and asked them to practice the coma spell one by one. Especially after he fell into a coma, he poured water on him to wake him up, then fell into a coma again, and then woke him up again. No one can stand this cycle. However, the cooperation of these elves is needed later. So he once again used his thoughts to instill his meaning into their minds. This time, the elf finally understood that the voice that just appeared in his mind came from the demon in front of him. Well, when Lockhart read the word demon, he curled his lips helplessly, but did not say much. Seeing that these elves understood what he meant, he pointed his wand at them and controlled them to float in front of the little wizards. Then, looking at the eager expressions of the little wizards, Lockhart revealed a smile in his eyes and shouted, "Begin." In the new book period, follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top for easy access to the latest chapters. Chapter 45, Little Wizard vs. Little Elves. Following Lockhart's order, the elves flew everywhere with a whizzing sound. They had just heard the big demon say that, as long as they could avoid the attacks of the little demons below, they could let them go. So this time, they used all their strength, flapped their wings, and quickly moved away from the little wizards. Stupid. Stupid. Looking at the elves running around, the little wizards below quickly waved their wands and continuously released the stunning spell. For a moment, spells flew all over the classroom, and the elves flew around frantically, relying on their sensitive induction to quickly avoid attacks. As for the results of the battle, not a single one was hit. Seeing a large number of spells flying everywhere, while the elves nimbly avoided a large number of attacks, Lockhart couldn't help but sigh. Sure enough, it was as he expected. Previously, he caught the elves in front of him and let them train one by one, which led to such a result. Now encountering a more chaotic scene, the elves also flew desperately, and the accuracy and strength of the stunning spell dropped greatly. In some cases, two stunning spells collided with each other and cancelled each other out. The young wizards saw the elves dodging in the sky, especially some elves sticking out their tongues at them and making mocking expressions. They were immediately furious and waved their wands even harder. Well, the record has been very stable, not a single one was hit. At this time, some smarter young wizards came to their senses and knew that continuing might not help, so they began to think of other ways. Like Hermione from Gryffindor, she pulled Harry, who was casting stunning spells in an orderly manner, and Ron, who had just received a new wand, and whispered, "We can't continue. These elves fly too fast, we can't hit any of them, we must work together to besiege one and limit its flying speed, so that we can hit it. And it won't work with just the three of us, we must find others to help us limit its speed." Hearing Hermione's suggestion, Harry and Ron nodded, and then they looked for classmates they had a better relationship with to fight together. At the same time, the students of Slytherin College also began to do the same thing, calling their friends and trying to find ways to hit the elves. Lockhart saw this and nodded slightly. These little wizards were very smart and knew that unity is strength. Then he waved his wand and hit back the two elves close to the glass. Just kidding, there were only 15 elves, and the number was not large to begin with. If two more escaped, it would be a loss. These were all gold galleons. Well, at this moment, Lockhart completely forgot the promise he made to the elves just now. Soon obstacles fall to the ground. Bang! The small team represented by Harry and Hermione successfully used the obstacle spell to limit the flying speed of the elves, and then hit a Cornish elf and knocked it to the ground. Ron quickly ran forward and caught the fainted elf. Then, the Slytherin College did not dare to fall behind. Draco led his little followers to hit one together. The two elves fell down and made a sound, as if opening a prelude. Many young wizards gradually became familiar with the flying trajectory of the elves. They cast spells one after another, successfully limiting the flying speed of the elves, and then knocked them down one by one. Looking at the elves that kept fleeing in the air with a somewhat desperate expression, Lockhart laughed. It's not that he didn't keep his promise, but that none of you escaped. Don't blame him for that. After a while, the last elf was successfully hit by Harry Potter. Ron quickly ran up and took it in his hand with a bright smile on his face. Snap, snap, snap. Seeing that there were no more elves flying in the sky, Lockhart clapped his hands and said encouragingly, "Congratulations, you have successfully caught these 15 elves. Now, you can tell me how many your team has hit in total." As soon as Lockhart finished speaking, Ron and Harry ran up to him with 5 elves in their hands. He kept waving his hands and said loudly with some boasting, Professor, we caught 5 in total." At the same time, others also ran to Lockhart and shouted loudly, "Professor, we caught 2. Professor, we caught 4. Seeing the little wizards gathered in a circle, holding 2 or 3 elves in their hands and constantly shouting and showing off, Lockhart pressed down his hands and suddenly quieted down. Don't be anxious, let me count first. Gryffindor house caught 8, Slytherin house caught 7. So, Gryffindor house adds 8 points, Slytherin house adds 7 points. After saying that, Lockhart looked at the little wizards with expectant faces, smiled heartily, and continued. Come, let me see. The first place is Ron. Harry's group caught a total of 5. As he said that, Lockhart gently waved his wand, stuffed the elves into the cage, and took out a magic amulet, and put it in Ron's hand. Looking at Ron, who was excited, he encouraged him. This is the reward for your group. You can distribute it yourself. Then he continued, the second place is Draco and Goyle. This group caught 4 elves. After class, you can discuss what snacks you want. I will ask the owl to bring them to you. The third place is Raven and Mora's group. Soon, Lockhart put all the elves into the cage and talked about his rewards. Then he said loudly to the little wizards who had returned to the team, I'm very happy that you can unite this time. Only by uniting against powerful enemies can we deal with them more effectively. This is the principle I taught you on the first day of class. Secondly, students who did not receive rewards this time should not be discouraged. I will hold a competition with rewards every month in the future. At that time, whether you rank at the top or have made great progress, you can get my reward. Hearing Professor Lockhart's promise, the little wizards exclaimed and discussed excitedly. Sure enough, people are honest and true to themselves. Professor Lockhart is generous and a rich man. They like this kind of professor who spends money easily. After a while, as the bell rang, this defense against the dark arts class officially ended. Lockhart watched the group of little wizards pouring out of the classroom. Then he looked down at the group of Hermione, Harry, and Ron who were silently surrounding him, and asked gently, what's wrong? Is there anything you don't understand about the stunning spell? The 3 little ones shook their heads in unison, and then Ron spoke first to thank them. Thank you, Professor Lockhart, for the wand. Without the wand, I really can't cast spells, he said reluctantly, and picked up the wand and handed it to Lockhart. Seeing this, Lockhart smiled and said, okay, this wand is for you. In return, you must study hard in the defense against the dark arts class later, and strive to get a good score on the exam. As soon as he finished speaking, Ron looked up in surprise. Really? Professor? Seeing Professor Lockhart nod slightly, Ron nodded excitedly and said, thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor. I will definitely study the defense against the dark arts class seriously. I will definitely study hard. Seeing this, Lockhart smiled with satisfaction. Well, when the time comes, I will have a chance to visit your home and talk about alchemy. With his mind turning, Lockhart asked Hermione and Harry next to him. Harry, Hermione, is there anything going on between you two? In the new book period, follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top so that they can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 46, The Deal with Snape. No, Professor. Harry shook his head. I do, Professor. Hermione raised her right hand high. Unlike Harry's silence, Hermione asked a series of questions directly. Professor, I want to ask if there are any other techniques for practicing the stunning spell. I just felt that the magic power was a little stagnant. Does the Cornish elf have any weaknesses? Why is it blue all over? Also, I feel so sorry for them. Can we let it go? Hearing Hermione's series of questions, Lockhart stroked his forehead helplessly. Well, I just forgot what I just said a few days ago. This curiosity is really strong. As for whether to release the Cornish elf, just kidding. 15 gold galleons, 1 gold galleon for each. You can't waste money like this. Then, with a gentle smile on his face, he silently looked at Hermione, who kept asking questions, but didn't say anything. And Hermione seemed to have thought of something. Her voice became smaller and smaller, and her speech speed became slower and slower. Seeing this, Lockhart nodded secretly in his heart. Sure enough, for someone who keeps chattering, staring into her eyes, and saying nothing is the best solution. When Hermione stopped talking completely, Lockhart spoke, his tone slightly serious. Hermione, I just told you a few days ago. You forgot so quickly. Well, when you go back, you can write a paper, based on what I said a few days ago, with no limit on the number of words. Then you can come to me on Sunday with the paper and the 3 most important questions you think. Now, you can go to the Gry, find a common room and rest for a while. If I remember correctly, you should have an astronomy class in the evening, so prepare in advance. Looking at the 3 nodding little ones, especially watching the somewhat lost figure of Hermione leaving, Lockhart thought silently. Sure enough, it is rare to meet a child who understands everything at once in this world. It all needs to be cultivated slowly. Some ways of thinking, behavioral habits, and even vision need to be cultivated. Although he felt that Hermione's plea to the elf just now was understandable, he did not agree with it at all. After all, she was young and a girl, so it was normal for her to feel some pity. He thought Hermione should learn from Ancient One. TSK. They were both women and wizards. You ask Ancient One to have pity on those dimensional demons. The strong ones were fine. The weak ones were all beaten by Ancient One. Well, Lockhart had read many records praising Ancient One in the magic books borrowed from Kamar-Taj. The next morning, in the Hogwarts cafeteria, Lockhart carried a plate of food, walked to Snape, sat down and tasted it slowly. Professor Snape glanced at Lockhart, without any expression, and continued to eat today's breakfast. Lockhart didn't care, and slowly ate the food on his plate. He was trying something unimportant, but very stress relieving recently. That is, eat every kind of food in Hogwarts, then attach a score. As for the bad ones, he would never touch them again. As for the good ones, he could eat a few more bites in the future and study how to make them. Add one more chapter to your gourmet journey. According to his experience, as long as you don't gain weight, gourmet food is one of the best tools to relieve stress. Well, now the problem of not gaining weight can be solved through magic. In order to carry out magic research efficiently, you naturally have to relieve stress more. The only pity is that the variety of food in the UK is not as rich as in my own country in my previous life. I'm afraid that, after eating for a while, I will have to face the trouble of finding gourmet food. Soon, Snape solved his breakfast, and Lockhart almost controlled the speed, and solved it at the same time. Then tell me, Professor Lockhart, what's the matter? A cold tone came from Snape's mouth. In this situation just now, even Muggles knew that Lockhart must have something to do with him. Although he had a general impression of Lockhart, he was a colleague after all. If there was anything, he would put it aside first, but it was still necessary to listen. Otherwise, this Lockhart would be as annoying as the past few days. But Lockhart didn't care. He knew Snape very well. He said directly, Professor Snape, do you know the golden clover? Oh, it's the magical plant that you and Professor Sprout talked about, which can restore magic power. Snape raised his eyebrows, and a sense of curiosity rose in his tone. Professor Lockhart, if you have it, I can buy some and do research. Hearing what Snape said, Lockhart was a little surprised, but then he suddenly realized. It seems that either Snape was also paying attention to him on the first night of school, or Professor Sprout also asked Snape about the golden clover. But it doesn't matter, as long as you, Snape, are curious about the golden clover. If Professor Snape needs it, I have a channel for the golden clover. I can send you a copy for a search in a few days. Lockhart said with a smile. Tell me, what's the matter? Hearing that Lockhart gave it to him for free, although Snape knew that it must not be completely free, the corners of his mouth on his indifferent face still curled up slightly. Haha, it's not a difficult task. Lockhart knew that the matter had been settled this time when he heard Snape's relaxed tone. Sure enough, Snape and I were both smart people who understood everything at once. I want to buy a batch of potions from you. Some of them are special. If the quantity is large, I want to ask if there is a discount price. Hearing Lockhart's request, Snape looked at Lockhart with some suspicion and said bluntly, potions, I must have them here. Even if I don't have them, I can make them. But, what are you going to do? Are you planning to smuggle? Hearing Snape's question, Lockhart smiled and gave the reason he had prepared long ago. Of course not. On the one hand, I also need some potions myself, and on the other hand, my channels also need potions to maintain relationships. Don't worry, it has nothing to do with smuggling. Look at me, a professor at Hogwarts and a famous writer. Do I make much money from smuggling? Hearing Lockhart's answer, Snape nodded in agreement. That's right. Someone like you who is so generous and pursues fame naturally wouldn't want to be tainted by the smuggling. Well, it seems that his reputation has spread from students to professors. However, it's impossible to get a discount, but I can guarantee that the quality is definitely much better than what you buy on the market. Hearing Snape's reply, Lockhart pondered for a moment and nodded slowly. Alright. However, my latest manuscript fee will not be paid until the end of the month, so can I advance this batch of potions in advance? I need them urgently. Well, regarding the purchase of the Defense Against the Dark Arts textbooks for Hogwarts students, it really has to wait until the end of the month before it will be distributed to me. However, seeing that Snape's face was a little ugly, Lockhart still added, don't worry, as a price, I will give you another rare magical plant, the Soyun flower, which can warm up your mental power. Hearing Lockhart's promise, Snape thought about it. He also knew that Lockhart had changed his textbooks this year. He felt that there shouldn't be any problems, but he still nodded reluctantly. Okay, what potion do you need? I'll go back and sort it out. It's only the beginning of the month, and there will be at least 20 days until the end of the month, which is a bit long. However, the unknown magical plants are worth waiting for. As for Lockhart running away with the money or deceiving himself, he thought about it, but forgot about it in a blink of an eye. He is a professor and a well-known writer, especially he has been so generous in the past few days. He shouldn't do this. If he really dares to do this, do you think his sharp sword is not sharp? In the new book period, the follow-up reading data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top for easy access to the latest chapters. Chapter 47 Lockhart is mocked. Saturday, Snape's office. Lockhart looked at the slightly dim office and frowned slightly. Then he looked at the large number of wooden shelves placed next to the office with interest. To be precise, it should be the glass jars on the shelves. Basically, each shelf has a large glass, in which various specimens are soaked. The viscera of a salamander. The eyes of a dragon. The tongue of a hippogriff. In recent days, Lockhart has read a lot of books about potion materials, but it is still a bit difficult to observe the collection in Snape's office. Don't identify it. With your current knowledge, it's difficult to recognize all of them. Snape's mocking tone came to his ears, but Lockhart didn't care. He turned around, walked to the middle of the house, squatted down, and looked at the crucible with orange flames underneath, and hot steam coming out of the pot. Lockhart could see that there was a slightly yellowish cream-like substance in the crucible. So he asked Snape with some curiosity, how many times can this pot of truth serum be used? Snape, who was sorting out the materials, glanced at it indifferently and said lightly, this pot has about 5 bottles of it. 3 drops are enough for ordinary wizards, and 5 bottles are enough for you to use 60 times. Hearing Snape's introduction, Lockhart nodded slowly, stood up, and continued to look at the layout of Snape's office with interest. He was quite interested in the bookshelf on the right side of the office. Just by looking at the titles of the books, he knew that they were all related to potions. And the potion books collected in Snape's office must have their own unique features. Can I take a look at this? A brief analysis of advanced potions technology. Lockhart pointed to a book on the bookshelf and asked Snape beside him. No. Snape took a look and flatly refused. With your current level of potion knowledge, you can't understand the content of the book at all. It's a pure waste of time. Faced with the ridicule of a top potion master, Lockhart waved his hand helplessly and said nothing. Just sit still and wait for 10 minutes, then the truth serum will be ready. Then take your potion and leave. Snape said coldly. A hint of impatience flashed across his face as he looked at Lockhart looking around his office. Although he knew that the potion Lockhart might want was a little special, otherwise he would not have asked for his help. Unexpectedly, after reading the potion list Lockhart made for him, he realized that Lockhart, who seemed to have thick eyebrows and big eyes, wanted to buy potions that were banned from circulation by the Ministry of Magic. Well, the quantity was acceptable, but the nature was quite special. He still had some potions, such as Polyjuice Potion and Soul Potion. There were also some potions that needed to be made, such as the Truth Serum that was being brewed. It was not until now that the potion Lockhart wanted was prepared. Although the potion Lockhart wanted was of a special nature, he did not care at all. The reason why he could buy all kinds of precious potion materials in such an office was that he earned gold galleons by selling those banged potions. As for the laws of the Ministry of Magic, sorry, he was a dark wizard before. Isn't it normal to ignore the laws issued by the Ministry of Magic? Soon, the truth serum was brewed. Snape packed the truth serum carefully and responsibly and put the rest of the potions into a space bag. He handed it to Lockhart and asked him to leave his office. Faced with Snape's expulsion, Lockhart thanked him and could only walk out of the office helplessly. After all, he is a top potion master. It is normal to be a little arrogant. Which of his colleagues in his previous life was not arrogant? However, looking at the small space bag in his hand, Lockhart's face was full of smiles. Snape is worthy of being a top potion master. Most of these potions that are difficult to buy on the market are in Snape's hands. Even if he doesn't have them, he can make them all in just a few days. However, when he thought of the debt of thousands of gold galleons, Lockhart couldn't help but twitch in his heart. The last large-scale purchase of potions consumed more than half of his funds at once. This time, he finally waited for the royalties to come back. Looking at the situation, I'm afraid that the royalties will be sent to Snape as soon as they are received. TSK. As expected, mastering a profound technology is popular. No, this time in the Marvel world, I must find a way to make money. Otherwise, I will eat up all the money. Even if I publish another book and earn royalties, it will take time. Lockhart felt a little anxious, but looking at the space bag in his hand, he felt much more at ease. This time, he put his family's wealth on this batch of magic potions. I hope that this time in the Marvel world, I can get enough gains. As long as I can open up a stable income channel, I will make a fortune. In fact, some ideas have emerged in his mind. In the future, he will need a large number of gold galleons, because the promotion of a new magic system depends on manpower and material resources. Lack of money is absolutely not allowed. Gold galleons must not be saved, they must be spent to see the effect. Only by spending them can you get more gold galleons in the future. Just like he has been distributing various magic amulets these days. Although these amulets are low cost, they cannot withstand being distributed monthly, especially when he plans to increase the number of rewards and even the frequency, which will require gold galleons. Although there is a lot of investment in the early stage, the benefits will be huge in the later stage. Today is Sunday, and all the little wizards are on holiday. Unlike the 3rd grade, the 1st and 2nd grades can go to Hogsmeade to play. They can only stay in Hogwarts. However, Hogwarts also has many interesting places, such as the Black Lake. Many little wizards like to play on the lawn around the Black Lake. The environment there is very beautiful, especially when the sunset falls. It is reflected on the lake, as if covered with a layer of golden coat, which is very beautiful. Therefore, basically every day there are many little witches going to the Black Lake to watch the sunset. For Hermione, today's sunset can be seen. But you must go to Professor Lockhart's office in advance, because she has finished revising her thesis. God knows, she doesn't know how many times she has revised it for this thesis. Every time I finish writing, I always feel that some places are not described in place, or not profound enough. This is not like the potion or spell papers left by the teacher before, which only need to collect information from books, summarize and organize. Professor Lockhart left a paper. It is an explanation of a kind of thinking concept. Everyone will have their own understanding. And every time you think deeply, you are likely to have new ideas. And Hermione, as a very serious little witch, keeps thinking about the views put forward by Professor Lockhart before. The more she thinks, the more she feels the depth of this kind of thinking. Even from time to time, a new idea will pop up, which makes her suddenly enlightened, and her eyes brighten. In fact, Lockhart summarized his previous ideas as control input. This set of ideas is the essence of his experience accumulated in his previous life for more than 20 years. I don't know how many detours he took, and how many pits he fell into. Only then did he summarize a set of thinking methods. With this set of thinking methods, he could stand out in the entire academic circle in his previous life. Even others lost money in research projects, but he made money in research projects. It is closely related to this set of thinking. and he has integrated the control input thinking into his instinct. Even if he traveled to the Harry Potter world in the Marvel world, he still followed this concept to do things. PS. In order to help everyone better understand the concept of control input mentioned in this article, let me briefly introduce it. Well, it also proves that I'm not making it up. I personally believe in this concept very much. This concept originated from a very great person, Gilderoy. When he was young, he was determined to teach humans to think, so he studied physics, became a doctor of physics, and founded the TOC theory. TOC, commonly known as the theory of constraints. How powerful is this management theory? Let's put it this way, the two richest people in the world are using the TOC theory. Amazon's Bezos and Zara founder Amancio Ortega are both believers in the theory of constraints. Bezos requires executives to read books on the theory of constraints before joining Amazon. The origin of the concept of control input comes from a question that Lin Hengyi asked Gilderoy. The general meaning of this question is, if the essence of your thoughts is condensed into one sentence, what is this sentence? And Gilderoy's reply is, control the input. Controlling the input means controlling the input. It's just that the word feeding is more applicable to industrial production, and the word input is easier for the general public to understand. Later, the concept of controlling input will be gradually infiltrated, which is also a core concept of the protagonist's behavior. I will briefly introduce it tomorrow, but I won't say too much. It will be infiltrated slowly, no rush. In the new book period, it is extremely important to follow up on the reading data. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that they can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 48 Hermione's Greed. Sunday, Lockhart's office. The golden sunlight shines through the glass, falls into the office, and shines on his body. Lockhart suddenly feels warm all over. Today is a day off. He had a delicious breakfast early, sat in his office, and stretched lazily. Then he slowly flipped through the magic books borrowed from the Hogwarts library. Although he obtained a lot of valuable information from the book list a few days ago, but that was only limited to the level of information. What he has to do now is to find book knowledge purposefully, based on the information, read systematically, internalize, and then master it thoroughly. Understanding magic knowledge is one level. Using the magic wand to cast spells is another level. The brain says it knows, but the hand says it doesn't. Lockhart is very taboo about such things. While reading the book, Lockhart subconsciously reached out with a toothpick, picked up a small piece of mango from the fruit plate next to him, and put it in his mouth. Tasting and reading at the same time, it is so pleasant. In addition to taking notes when reading, he also likes to eat some fruits, to relieve some of the pressure brought by reading. As time passed, the small plate of mangoes was almost gone. Suddenly, bang, bang, bang. Professor, it's me. Lockhart heard a crisp knock on the door, mixed with a familiar girl's voice. He was a little confused at first, but soon reacted and said immediately, "It's Hermione, please come in, the door is not locked." As Lockhart's voice fell, the office door creaked and slowly opened. Hermione walked in with a piece of parchment in her hand. Looking at Professor Lockhart, who was reading a book opposite, he asked carefully, "Professor Lockhart, I'm here to hand in the paper you mentioned before." After hearing this, Lockhart thought about it for a while, and then he suddenly realized what the paper Hermione was talking about. It was the paper he asked her to write about the conversation on the train. When he thought of this, Lockhart's heart aroused a little interest. He was a little curious about how this little witch viewed his remarks. He had shared his ideas with his graduate students before. Some of them really listened, but most of them just listened. He didn't feel sorry for those who didn't listen. It was just that their thoughts were not in sync. But I don't know what Hermione, the little witch, would think. Turning his head slightly, he saw a few mango fruit plates. Looking at Hermione standing opposite, he thought for a moment, and waved his hand, to signal her to come over. "Hermione, come and find a stool to sit down. I'll take a look at your thesis first. You can taste the mango. It tastes pretty good." As he said that, Lockhart waved his wand lightly, and the stain on the fruit plate disappeared quietly. At the same time, 3 mangoes quietly floated in the air. As the mangoes slowly turned, the peels fell off naturally. Then, Lockhart pointed his wand lightly at the fruit plate, and the peeled mangoes quietly split into more than 10 pieces and placed around the fruit plate. Several toothpicks were quietly inserted into the small pieces of mango in the fruit plate. The whole process took only a few seconds, but it was enough to make Hermione feel a little surprised or envious. Professor Lockhart was really exquisite in enjoying life, although she could also cast a spell to do the same thing. But it was obvious that Professor Lockhart was very familiar with the process of cutting fruits just now, as if she didn't know how many times she had repeated it. Gently waving the wand, without reciting the spell, she could do it. Hermione looked at the fruit plate floating in front of her, reached out and picked up a toothpick, took a small piece of mango, and put it in her mouth. Tasted it carefully. Well, it tastes really good, and it's still iced. Professor Lockhart really knows how to enjoy life, just like her father. Sure enough, as long as a man has money, he will pursue quality of life. My mother is not lying to me. At this moment, Lockhart did not pay attention to Hermione's expression, but looked at the parchment in his hand with interest, or more precisely, the thesis recorded on it. Hermione, this little witch is really good. Although the content of the thesis is a bit superficial, and there are even some obvious mistakes and omissions. However, there are many highlights. In terms of this level of thinking, in essence, in some aspects, they are not inferior to the graduate students under his previous life. Then, he looked at Hermione, who was eating mango in small bites. He did not speak, but let Hermione finish the mango in the fruit plate, and then slowly asked, Hermione, your paper is quite good for your age. I like this point you emphasized in the paper. As he said, Lockhart picked up the paper in his hand and read it slowly. For practicing spells, you must adhere to the principle of small amount and high quality. Focus on 3, or even 1 spell, and practice it carefully. Hermione was a little embarrassed when she looked at the empty fruit plate. The iced mango was delicious, and she ate it all in one breath. But with Lockhart's praise, a bright smile appeared on her face, and she quickly said, Thank you, Professor. I was very touched when you mentioned a small number of high quality ideas on the train before. Next time, I will definitely not ask a large number of questions at once. Always follow the principle of small number and high quality. Hearing what Hermione said, Lockhart nodded in agreement and said approvingly, Hermione, you are really smart. I believe that you will become a well-known figure in the wizarding world in the future. Hearing what Lockhart said, Hermione seemed a little frightened. Maybe Lockhart's praise was a bit too much, and he felt a little psychologically stressed, but he still asked back, Really? Professor Lockhart? In response to Hermione's panic, Lockhart nodded heavily. Believe me, I rarely make mistakes when judging people. You will definitely achieve something in the future. After saying that, Lockhart didn't want to continue the discussion on this topic, and asked directly, Hermione, according to what I said before, you have brought your paper now, so what are the 3 questions you carefully prepared? Tell me, I will try my best to explain your questions thoroughly. Lockhart's reply made Hermione's face happy, and then she quickly took out the 3 questions she had carefully prepared and asked. Professor, the first question, I want to know where there are problems with my paper. Can you explain it to me in detail? The second question, can you explain the thinking you mentioned before to me in depth? I found that there are many places that I don't understand. The third question, do you have any good suggestions on how to learn magic quickly? Hearing the 3 questions that Hermione carefully prepared, Lockhart sighed lightly. Sure enough, at such a young age, it is good enough to realize the point of small amount of high quality. You can't force too much, just cultivate it slowly. In Lockhart's opinion, there is nothing wrong with these 3 questions. It can be said that they completely follow the principle of small amount. But in terms of quality, these 3 questions do not meet Lockhart's standards. Because these 3 questions are too broad and can further derive countless questions. The first question is better, it is limited to this paper. The second question has exposed the problem. He actually wants to understand and master his way of thinking through one question. He is not bragging. His way of thinking, if you pick out some of the essence of his ideas, you can write a book. The third question further highlights Hermione's wrong cognition. The field of magic practice is too large. It is a foolish dream to think that you can quickly master magic learning with a few suggestions. Besides, even if he really makes suggestions, he must understand Hermione's magic level, the magic knowledge he has mastered, and his learning habits in detail, before he can give some accurate suggestions. Of course, for a little witch like Hermione, it is good to think of these 3 questions. As long as she can restrain her greed for knowledge, her future achievements will definitely not be too low. To be honest, Lockhart believes that Ravenclaw is more suitable for a little witch like Hermione. TSK. The greed for knowledge is ingrained in the bones of Ravenclaw. PS. Because some readers suggested to thank at the end of the article, to improve everyone's reading experience, the thanks will be placed at the end of the article in the future. Also, today I received the notification of the recommended position for next week from Gideon. Thank you very much for the support of readers during this period. In the next 2 days, I will sort out the list of all readers who have voted for recommendations, monthly tickets, and rewards during this period. It is expected that a separate chapter of thanks will be listed on Monday. Thank you very much for your support. Thanks to Chen, Book Friend 201909140958222499, Mosquito Learn Giant Source, Elite, Guemoming, Mrak Baron, GG Fuji GA, WHT 2004, ZFNEU monthly ticket. Thanks to Sloppy Monster for the reward. Thanks to Tarja Crossing, Mency Ren, ZHI Feng and other readers for the recommendation votes. Too many people voted for the recommendation. I sorted it out in the next 2 days and listed a separate chapter on Monday to thank. New book period. Follow-up reading data is extremely important. Please like the readers of this book to pin it to the top so that you can see the latest chapters. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49. Lockhart suffers from his old problems. In Lockhart's previous life, he had strict requirements for the questions his graduate students asked. There should not be too many questions, only 3 at most. At the same time, the questions must be specific and of high quality. Don't be too broad, and don't ask questions that can be found on Baidu. It would be best if his graduate students could understand this requirement. If they couldn't understand it, as long as Lockhart deducted money, they would understand it quickly. Well, no matter whether they could understand it or not, it would cause less trouble to Lockhart. Money has magic power, and it can easily change the cognition of those who don't understand. Lockhart understood the 3 questions Hermione asked very well. This was her true level. He had just had a simple chat on the train before, and didn't emphasize it specifically. It was normal to have questions. However, for the little witch Hermione in front of him, Lockhart liked her more and more. At such a young age, she liked to use her brain and think. Although she was wrong in some places, it undoubtedly showed that Hermione was worth cultivating. Thinking of this, Lockhart suddenly became very interested and spoke to Hermione. Hermione, you asked 3 questions. I will answer the second one first. I will explain the remaining questions to you in detail later. Hermione was a little confused about Lockhart's refusal, but she nodded. Seeing this, Lockhart changed a new mango platter and placed it on the desk. He asked Hermione to sit at the desk opposite him and explained slowly. Today I will share with you a way of thinking. You may not be able to understand this way of thinking for the time being, but you can just write it down. You can slowly comprehend it in the days to come. Seeing Hermione nodded in confusion, Lockhart didn't care and continued. I call this way of thinking controlled input. The idea of small amount of high quality that you mentioned before is a manifestation of this way of thinking. Controlling input, you can understand it as restraining yourself, restraining your behavior, controlling your input, making your behavior conform to the rules, and not doing unnecessary things. First of all, we must have a systematic mindset, treat everything as a system, and consciously limit the element that into the system. We must seize the opportunity, don't do it as soon as you think about it, and know how to use a little to achieve a great result. Reduce the degree of chaos in the system. Pursue a small amount of high quality, and restrain your desire to invest. Hermione stared at Professor Lockhart in front of her with wide eyes, listening carefully to the large number of jerky and difficult words coming out of his mouth. Hermione tried very hard to think and remember the information that was constantly instilled in her mind. But sadly, she found that she could hear every word and every phrase that Professor Lockhart said clearly, but it was very difficult for her to understand them when they were combined into sentences. I always feel like I understand it, as if I understand a little, but it seems that I don't understand anything. She could only nod subconsciously and kept replying. Despite this, Hermione could sense that what Professor Lockhart said was of great value. Especially watching the golden sunlight shining through the glass, shining on Professor Lockhart, who was talking freely, full of confidence, as if everything was under control. It was as if he was wearing a golden halo. At this moment, Hermione was a little stunned. She suddenly felt that Professor Lockhart at this moment was like a god, high above and untouchable. He was like a wise man who spread the great way, with a sense that he could only be viewed from a distance and not be played with. She tried very hard to understand and approach him, but still felt extremely strenuous and even fearful. Control input. This is a very applicable way of thinking that can be used in various fields. At this time, Lockhart noticed Hermione's blank face and knew that what he said made Hermione unable to understand. Suddenly, a feeling of boredom arose in her heart. So she controlled herself and began to finish. Hermione, you may not understand a lot of what I just said, but it doesn't matter. Just remember what I said before. When you really encounter something, you will slowly understand what I mean. Finally, I will give you 3 sentences, which are also the core principles of controlling input thoughts. Less is more. Slow is fast. Small is big. Hearing Professor Lockhart's last words, Hermione came back to her senses, nodded heavily, and repeated in a low voice, less is more, slow is fast, small is big. Hearing Hermione's silent recitation, Lockhart nodded and said gently, okay, Hermione. Don't think too much. You can't understand what I just said at your age now. Don't be impatient. When you really encounter something, you will understand. Now, you can go back to the Gryffindor common room and spend this wonderful holiday. Hearing what Lockhart said, Hermione, who was shocked by a lot of information, subconsciously turned around and slowly left the office. When she walked out of the office, she suddenly realized that she had left and turned to look at the closed office door. Suddenly I felt the vastness of truth, the humbleness of ignorance. The ignorance in my eyes gradually dissipated, replaced by a kind of fanatic light for knowledge. If Lockhart now observes Hermione's character recognition, he will find something very strange. Hermione's recognition keeps jumping from 50 to 20, then jumps back to 30, 50, 40, and finally stabilizes to 75/100ths. Unfortunately, since entering Hogwarts, Lockhart has paid less and less attention to the system. He is now completely obsessed with the study of spells and runes, constantly wanting to develop more powerful spells suitable for wizards. There were even a few days when he didn't even open the system, let alone observe character recognition and reputation draws. At this moment, Lockhart, looking at the tightly closed office door, stroked his forehead, and a bitter smile rose on his face. Sure enough, his old habit of being a teacher has come back again. Seeing Hermione, a smart and talented student, he couldn't help but share his ideas with her and let her become his follower and companion. He didn't consider her ability to accept at all. Or rather, he had considered it, but he subconsciously forgot it. In fact, Lockhart understood very early that it would take a long time for his students to agree with his ideas. It requires long-term immersion and long-term indoctrination so that he can regard it as the right idea from the bottom of his heart and practice it. And a large amount of information indoctrination at once, in many cases, will only make the other party have a rebellious psychology. I should restrain myself. Restrain my desire to be a teacher. Unfortunately, I'm a human, not a god, and my old problem has come back. There are only 6 hours left in the countdown to the shuttle Marvel world. At this moment, it has been 2 weeks since the start of school, and basically all students have become familiar with life in Hogwarts. In other words, every grade has become familiar with the new professor of defense against the dark arts, Gilderoy Lockhart. After 2 weeks, 7 grades have 3 different opinions about him. Students from grades 1 to 3 think that Professor Lockhart is very gentle and interesting. Students in the 4th and 5th grades thought that Lockhart was very strict. He made them learn a lot of knowledge in every class and left them with a lot of homework. He felt that he would not stop until they were exhausted. Students in the 6th and 7th grades thought that Professor Lockhart was not like a teacher, but like a friend. In every class, in addition to explaining knowledge, he would share some of his own experiences, discuss some adventurous cases, and sometimes share some of his own ideas and experiences. Although these grades had mixed opinions on Lockhart, they all had a common understanding. Professor Lockhart was a rich man, and was really generous. Because in these 2 weeks, basically every grade had more or less people who received various magic snacks and even magic amulets. This made a lot of students' eyes glow with enthusiasm. Because Professor Lockhart's money spending action not only did not shrink, but instead had a trend of gradually expanding. At this moment, Lockhart was in the library, making his request to the librarian, Mrs. Pince, who was reading a book in front of him. Pince, I need your help with something. In the new book period, follow-up data is extremely important. Readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top, so that you can easily see the latest chapters. Chapter 50. Dumbledore is somewhat confused. What's the matter, Lockhart? Madam Pince looked up and asked Lockhart with some confusion. Ever since Lockhart borrowed a list of books from the Hogwarts library from her, he basically became a regular visitor to the library. He would go to the library to read books almost every noon or evening, and borrow 1 or 2 magic books at the same time. After a few visits, the two gradually became familiar with each other. They addressed each other more intimately, and she and Lockhart no longer exchanged polite words. Well, it definitely had nothing to do with Lockhart's handsome appearance. Pince, I'm doing a research recently. I'm collecting information now, so I need to borrow a lot of books. Do you think it's okay? How many books? What are they? Let me take a look first. Faced with Lockhart's request, Madam Pince, as a librarian, immediately grasped the key point. A lot of books. Looking at Madam Pince, who was a little wary and asked back, Lockhart smiled helplessly and handed over a list of books. It's a pity. It would be great if Madam Pince agreed directly. He could just pick up a batch of magic books and go back to the office. After taking it, Madam Pince frowned slightly. She found that the number Lockhart mentioned was really large. A full 60 books. Immediately, she raised her head, looked at Lockhart with some suspicion and asked, Professor Lockhart, what kind of research is this? You need so many books. Facing Madam Pince's doubts, Lockhart said very calmly, recently, I've been studying how to reduce the cost of alchemy, and I want to get some inspiration and information from these books. Hearing this, Madam Pince glanced at the book list again, and found that most of them were indeed related to alchemy. Then she thought of the rumors in the academy and suddenly realized something. She had heard a lot that Professor Lockhart gave magic amulets to outstanding young wizards in each grade. It seems that Professor Lockhart, who is generous, is also a little tight. He actually thought about reducing the cost of alchemy. TSK. At this time, Madam Pince looked at Lockhart with a strange look in her eyes. Lockhart felt a little strange, but he didn't think much about it. Because Madam Pince had agreed to his request, he was now looking for books with the list. As for Madam Pince's mental activities, he was not interested in guessing. The world was big, but nothing was bigger than him looking for books. After a while, Lockhart walked towards Madam Pince, with 4 tall piles of books floating behind him. Soon, Madam Pince looked at the tall pile of books in front of her, and scratched her head in distress. There were exactly 60 books, divided into 4 piles. Each pile was as high as a person, completely surrounding her. She sighed lightly, carefully compared the parchment in her hand, and dutifully confirmed the information of the book. Soon, Madam Pince nodded lightly, and said to Lockhart, Professor Lockhart, the 60 books have been confirmed. No problem. When will they be returned? Lockhart thought for a moment and said quickly, soon, probably in 2 or 3 days. I just need to check some information and I can return them. Then, Lockhart heard his wife complaining, in fact, you can investigate the information in the library. There is no need to borrow so many books at once. In response, Lockhart smiled and put the books into the space bag without saying anything. Well, if I borrow them from the library, how can I bring so many books to the Marvel world? What's more, the place of this shuttle is the library of Kamar-Taj. I traveled to the Kamar-Taj library with a bunch of Hogwarts books. Am I going to show Master Ancient One how to die? With his mind turning, Lockhart left the library and walked towards his office. But what he didn't notice was that the portrait not far away was shaking slightly, and a figure in the portrait had just left quietly. Hogwarts, the principal's office. Dumbledore was sitting on his desk. He gently took off his half-moon lenses with his right hand, wiped them slowly, and put them on his eyes again, after wiping them clean. As if he felt his vision was a little clearer, Dumbledore continued to look down at the book on the table. What was a little strange was that this book was actually the latest book published by Lockhart, I'm Magic. In theory, ordinary wizards might like this kind of book, because the plot is more interesting. But for the experienced White Devil Dumbledore, it can't be said to be boring, but it should not have much value. At this moment, suddenly, a figure appeared in a blank portrait next to it, and a voice quietly came into Dumbledore's ears. Albus, we may have thought too much. I just saw Lockhart borrow a lot of alchemy books. He should want to improve his alchemy level. You also know that in the past 2 weeks, he has given his alchemy items to those excellent little wizards. Okay, I see. Dumbledore turned his head, nodded slightly at the portrait, and said gently, but, Principal Armando, can you help me keep an eye on Lockhart during this period of time? Okay, no problem, Albus. The portrait of Principal Armando Dupont gave a positive voice. At this moment, although hearing what Principal Armando Dupont said just now dispelled some of Dumbledore's doubts. But through the book he just read, combined with his understanding of Lockhart during this period of time, he found a strange thing. The Lockhart described in the book is quite different from the real Lockhart. One is a normal adventurer, and the other is more like a pure researcher. Although books can be appropriately exaggerated and changed, but it is impossible to be completely like two people. After all, this is an autobiography written by one person. At this moment, Lockhart was sitting in his office. Seeing the countdown appear on the system page, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. The countdown to the shuttle to the Marvel world is 5 minutes. Please prepare for the shuttle. Then, in order to prevent accidents, Lockhart reviewed his memory a month ago again, the moment he last stayed in the Kamar-Taj library. Then he waved his wand lightly, controlling the books of Kamar-Taj to float in front of him according to the arrangement in his memory. He held it gently with both hands. Everything was exactly the same as the moment before the shuttle, including the clothes, expressions, and even the eyes. Soon, a system prompt sound came to Lockhart's ears. At the same time, a faint light flashed, and the figure disappeared quietly. World transmission begins. Please prepare the host. Searching for the solidified world shuttle channel. Search successful. Teleporting. Transporting. Welcome the host back to the Marvel world. Warning, after staying in this world for 30 days, the soul will gradually be branded with the mark of this world. You need to leave this world in time to avoid being infected by the world's breath. P.S. Thanks to Tschen, TXL, Mo Huang, Hug Me Tight, Han Tier Crown Gudako, Zifiu, Gong Mu Hao, and Shuiao 201712080036083669 for their monthly tickets. Thanks to TXL for the reward. Thanks to WHT 2004. Ziffing, Rockets and other readers for their recommendation votes. Too many people voted for the recommendation. They are sorting it out, and a separate chapter will be listed on Monday to thank them. In the new book period, the reading data is extremely important, and readers who like this book are requested to pin it to the top for easy access to the latest chapters. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.